Long moves that House File number 2887 be taken from the table.
Representative Long.
That's my motion, Madam Speaker, so we can resume consideration of the transportation budget bill.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails.
Clerk will report the bill.
Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2887, an act relating to transportation, the third engrossment.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hudella moves to amend House File number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A40.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hudella.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, yesterday during our Veterans Bill, I talked briefly about that just less than 1%.
Here's the motion.
That less than 1% that volunteers to put a uniform on and defend our country. These are the finest men and women our nation has to offer. These are men and women that live every day by values like loyalty, duty, respect, and honor. Now, out of all these men and women that serve our country, there's a percentage of them that become disabled from their service. Basically, a lot of the veterans that go on a deployment or do 20 years or more of service end up getting a disability rating from our Veterans Administration. I've got a rating. I blew out a knee, lost some hearing. I look around at some of the other veterans in the chamber that I know have gone down range and I think likely have a rating as well. So out of that less than 1% that serves our country, there's a percentage that end up with a disability. The latest number I heard was around 30%. Now, out of that, roughly 30% of the less than 1%, there's a very small portion that give it all. They give 100% of their physical well-being in defense of our country. These are people like former State Representative John Kriesel that I had the privilege to serve with in the military. John lost both his legs in Iraq. He came back after bravely serving his country. John is now 100% disabled. What my amendment does is it asks for a small carve-out in our transportation bill to say thank you in a big way to these folks that have given 100% of their physical well-being that they'll have for the rest of their life through our transportation systems. The bill will allow these 100% disabled veterans to not pay motor vehicle sales tax if they need to go get a new vehicle. It'll allow them to not have to pay tab fees when it's time to renew their vehicle license tabs. They won't need to pay to have their driver's license renewed. It's a small series of fees for a very small demographic that is given, again, 100% of their physical well-being for you and me, so that we can be here in the chamber today in a free country, in a free state, exercising the will of the people. So I would ask for a green vote on this. This bill's been around for a few years, and I'm excited to try and get it through, and again, would encourage a green vote. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Hudella, and I will recommend a yes vote. And I want to thank Representative Hudella for bringing this forward, for your service. When we first discussed this in committee, we wanted to check on some fiscal matters, which you did. We checked with Chair Newton, and I really appreciate how you worked this, how you really kept everybody in the loop, and it's really a case study of how to get something accomplished. And so it's a lot of pride. I ask for a yes vote, and thank you very humbly, again, for your service and how you worked this amendment.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Franson moves to amend House File number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A88.
Is there anybody who would like to present the amendment for her, or shall we set it aside? The member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill in regards to climate change and some of the other concerns that we have, as we're pushing forward in regards to all of the things we want to do to control climate change and do our due diligence for being more efficient with our use and try to reduce carbon. One of the things that we need to keep in reminding is exactly what we're doing worldwide and socially in regards to the inputs and the products that are actually being used for this reduction in greenhouse gases. And so one of the things that this particular amendment does is it talks about our need for dealing with the world climate as a whole, and trying to determine also whether or not there's involvement with child labor, abuse in the humanities, all of those things as well. And we just think that's the best thing to do. And I'm just asking for a green vote because I think it's something that's important to do. We remember that just because we want to change our perceptions and our behavior here, when it impacts the world, et cetera, and we have the world products, world supply that's coming forward, we need to take that into consideration. It's the very reason why a lot of times the United States has had embargoes and tariffs against other countries, because we believe that human rights and human activity is important. We all here in the United States want to have everybody have equality in opportunities, equality in how our work ethics, as well as our work job facilities that we're working in. And I think we want the same thing for the world, et cetera. And so when we hear about mining, about production facilities that really are a detriment to our human rights, to the human rights of others, I think that's an important piece for us also to consider. It's one of those issues in which we can't say, you know, we like what we're doing here, but it's at the cost of somebody else. You know, I know that there were situations in the past when a lot of people would say, well, it doesn't impact me, so I'm not going to raise a big deal about it. And then pretty soon it got to the next community. Well, I'm still not going to say much about it because it's still not something that's going to impact me. And then finally, we have the situation where it impacts us, and then we ask, how come nobody's sticking up for us? How come nobody's sticking up for us? And so we need to continue to think about how we represent ourselves to the world, how we represent what we stand for. And I think it's more important for us to understand the ends don't justify the means. And if our ends are that we're going to reduce carbon here, but at what cost? What cost is that? Is that something that we really want to stand for? So we just wanted you to consider that, and we ask for a yes vote.
Member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for offering this amendment. I think it's a good one. It takes an important issue that we take seriously as well. Representative Listlegard's led on this issue a lot, and so I'd ask members for a yes vote.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Petersburg moves to amend House File Number 2887, the third engrossment, as amended. The amendment is coded A59.
The member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So how many have driven across the state and across the metropolitan area? Anybody ever hit a pothole? Yeah, they've kind of gotten overboard, haven't they? We are just overwhelmed with that. Well, this particular bill says let's use the funding for what we're going to propose for the construction of the Northern Lights Railroad up to Duluth, and let's put a good portion of that towards cities that really need help with potholes this year. We do that every once in a while. We give a little extra money for cities to help with that because it's an extra expense that's going there. And the rest of the dollars goes towards the actual HUTD for additional funding over the next 2 years, which also could help the state with some of the potholes across interstates and other things that we do. Now, why am I taking it from the Northern Lights? Well, the Northern Lights is a project that I think people want to pursue, but I'm concerned that it is probably not quite ready for prime time yet. I know that the railroad is going to need to do some upgrading themselves. We have a lot of other things that have to be done. So I don't think it's necessary for us to use the funds this year, and maybe not even this biennium, until we have those agreements done. Until we have discussions with BNSF, or whichever line it is, in regards to how they're going to be able to accomplish it, and we really know what's going on, we may be just setting aside money just to not go anywhere. So I'm hoping that we can get this money actually used for situations that really could occur. I heard the chair in a couple of different committees talk about the regressivity of potholes, right, Mr. Chair? It really is an important piece that we really deal with the potholes and help cities out. So I'm hoping that we can get a yes to that. And Madam Chair, I think there's an amendment to the amendment.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Backer moves to amend the Petersburg Amendment to House File Number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A102.
The member from Traverse, Representative Backer, to your amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What my amendment does is it takes $20 million and puts it into funding for additional funding for our township roads. I would suspect a lot of representatives don't know the total miles of township roads. Well, we have 55,000 miles of township roads. I represent 77 counties. I don't have all 55,000 miles, but I have a lot of them on that western part of Minnesota. And last week on Friday, I was with Traverse County Commissioner Metz. We were driving up to the city of Dumont to help with sandbagging up there because they were experiencing flooding. And we were taking a couple township roads, quite a few, and they were not very fun. And I was talking to Commissioner Metz, saying, because in Traverse County, the county does the grading because those graders are $1 million a piece. There's no way townships can purchase, most townships in Minnesota cannot purchase it. So my amendment adds an additional $20 million to it. This bill, of course, raises a lot of taxes on the wrong type of folks. But these folks, all Minnesotans use township roads a whole lot more than they would use a train railroad up to Duluth. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd recommend a no vote. We have a very strong position for town roads and bridges in this bill. We have additional funding of over $29 million in fiscal year 24-25 and $59.877 million in fiscal year 26 and 27. So we're doing very well for town roads, and we don't need this amendment.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I would just like to add my 2 cents in terms of our townships needing additional funding. I live at the end of a mile-long township road, and we were first blocked in before Thanksgiving. It's been a long winter, and when the snow finally quit coming, last weekend, I guess, then these gravel roads really turned into a quagmire. In fact, a lot of school districts are posting that they're only running on tarred roads. The gravel roads really took a beating this winter. A lot of trips across these roads with snow plows and such. A lot of that gravel wound up in the ditches, and the townships need help in getting those roads back into shape again. So I strongly support the Backer amendment to the amendment.
The member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would request a roll call for this, please.
Representative Petersburg requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Petersburg.
The reason why I think this is important, as the chair just mentioned, yes, we have $20 million or so in the bill for townships. Their request for deficiencies is $40 million, and I believe the bill puts about $40 million into small cities, which is also requested about that much. So I think this is an opportunity for us to actually put that in the bill and have the money go to the townships that really need it. Just remembering that the mileage that you heard represents about 46% of all the roads in the state of Minnesota. That's almost half of the roads. It's the last mile, the first mile that people go to. And there are township roads here in the metropolitan area as well. So it's not just greater Minnesota that we're talking about. So I would please request a green vote.
The member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
And also, I thank you, Representative Anderson. It's so true. A lot of our county roads are soft. As an EMS professional, we have fire and ambulance and police use these roads. So despite a $17.5 billion surplus, we are not prioritizing it where it needs to go. And that's, in my opinion, I appreciate the chair putting money into township roads. We really need more. We traveled them just in Traverse County last week, Chair, and they weren't fun, they were soft. And like Representative Anderson said, there's a lot of roads that they didn't take care of. Gravel's not cheap. So I would ask for a yes vote, and thank you, members.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment to the amendment. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment to the amendment is not adopted. We are on the underlying Petersburg amendment. Representative Petersburg.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, we still need to deal with the potholes, all right? And I think going to the HUTD will give some additional dollars to townships as well, and so that's a positive. And so, Madam Speaker, I would request a roll call for this.
Representative Petersburg requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
I think it's time for us to deal with the issues currently today and deal with the issues of the train when it's a little bit more ready, I should say, and some time in which we have more information about how it is actually going to work. So I'd please request a green vote.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Doubt moves to amend House Law Number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A57.
The member from Isanti, Representative Doubt, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is the A57 amendment. This is something that we've talked about in the chamber in the past. I'm offering an amendment to just prohibit using any dollars for the Rondo Land Bridge project that's been proposed just to the west of us here on Highway 94. I think you're all familiar with the area. You know, I think the problem with this, and I assume this will just be accepted, but I'll talk a little bit about it. That I think the problem with this project is it certainly is not a transportation project. It provides no benefit to transportation. In fact, it would, if we used transportation dollars to pay for a project like this, it will actually take money away from roads and bridges. We have a perfectly fine functioning highway on Highway 94 that runs through that area currently. And you know, lowering it to put in green space and a park and buildings may have benefit to the community, and I think that's debatable, but they certainly do not benefit our transportation system. So directing gas tax dollars or any other dollars that could be spent on roads and bridges I think is something that we should not do, and I don't think we should do this project at all. I don't think it helps heal the wounds of these communities, and I think it will not likely reconnect these communities. If you remember the promises that were made with the Green Line and what great thing that was going to do for these communities, it has really, frankly, been the opposite, hurting businesses. It's become really, frankly, an unsafe form of transportation that really nobody is using. So sometimes I know that people have ideas and they ask state government for money. I remember being in conversations with then Governor Dayton, and he would say at the end of our negotiations, he would say, well, so-and-so is asking for this project. And I would say, yep, and last year we funded this for them, and if we fund this thing that you think they should be, that they're asking for this year, we shouldn't be surprised when they're back asking us for more money next year. These people get paid to ask us for money. We shouldn't be surprised when they show up. But our job, we shouldn't assume that every idea is a good one. And our job is to sift through them and say, you know what, if we're going to spend $500 million, which is at the low end of, I think, what this project could cost, I can think of a lot of other things that we could spend $500 million on to improve our road and bridge infrastructure. So this is an easy one. I assume that it'll likely just be accepted, but I appreciate everybody's support on this amendment.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd recommend a no vote. There's no proposal for any funding for the land bridge before us. And I would just respectfully disagree with Representative Dowd on the issue of healing wounds in the community. That has been expressed to us time and time again from Mayor Carter, from different community leaders that have testified in the past on this issue before the committee. So I'd recommend again a no vote, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and I'm unfortunate to hear that you don't want to accept this amendment. I think it's something that is a no-brainer in protecting the tax dollars that we are stewards of here in the legislature. This is a project that, if those communities want to do it and they want to raise money for it, I think they need to convince us as the legislature that this is a worthy project, but we should not be directing tax dollars towards something like this. And I could go through, project by project, all of the things that we have done that have been horrible ideas in the legislature. And just because somebody has an idea and thinks it's a good one does not mean that we should accept it and adopt it and pass it. I also have a big frustration when gas tax dollars get used for things that they're not supposed to be used for. One thing that I really want to look into here in the legislature is, a lot of the communities like Minneapolis and St. Paul are actually closing streets, city streets, closing lanes of city streets to put in bike lanes. And my guess is in a lot of cases, those city streets were paid for with gas tax dollars. And those gas tax dollars are dedicated for roads and bridges, for transportation, for automobiles, not for bicycles. I would assume that someday if there isn't one working already, that we would likely see a challenge in court on some of those. And this project, while I think some might debate, and I have great respect for the chair of this committee and have worked well with him over the years and appreciate the work that he does, while we do disagree once in a while, this is a project that I think should never be paid for with any transportation dollars. This is not a transportation project. While it will include some construction, or would include, I don't think it'll ever get done, but if it did get done, if it did include any dollars that were redirected, transportation dollars, it would be a misuse of those transportation dollars. This is not a transportation project, and just because they want to lower the freeway and put a cap across it with some green space does not make it a transportation project. Those dollars should be spent improving the roads and bridges, and frankly, I think we've seen proposals like this horrible one yesterday, which I have a feeling is not going to come back from conference committee, but the 75-cent fee on every order that you'll place that gets delivered to your house. And in all the bad ideas that I've seen in the legislature, I think that one might be the worst. At a time when we have a $17.5 billion surplus, to pay for roads and bridges by disaffecting, senior citizens who might not be able to. I just think of what a benefit some of these things have been. I just think of what a benefit some of these things have been to communities like senior citizens and communities like folks that are handicapped or have don't have the ability to get out to the store like you and I might, or folks in rural areas who have a further distance to drive to a store. It's more efficient to order something and have it delivered to your house, and you can have many orders delivered on one. Somebody texted me last night after I couldn't think of it. It's called Prime Day apparently. You can just select to have all your packages delivered on one day. But that doesn't mean you'd get just one 75-cent fee because one truck came to your house. It still means you might have 7 different 75-cent fees from the 7 different days worth of orders that you had that all got delivered on one day.
Representative Dowd, if you could stick to the Rondo Land Bridge, and then I'm told that you may want a roll call.
Yeah, I would like a roll call. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dowd requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands or so, there will be a roll call. Representative Dowd.
I was just warming up. Thank you, Madam Speaker. But anyways, back
At
to
third reading, you can talk about anything in the bill.
Back to the land bridge. This is just when we're talking about, first of all, we have the largest surplus we've ever had in state history. We've got more money than we need, and to pay for transportation, Democrats' plan is to raise, $9 billion of new taxes, which would include this 75-cent per order fee. If we have to do that, we should not be paying for things like this. So that's exactly why this amendment is appropriate, and members, frankly, should support this. So to me, this is a no-brainer. Let's focus our tax dollars on the forms of transportation, first of all, actually on transportation, and then on the forms of transportation that people are using. And frankly, if we focused our tax dollars proportionately to the amount of people that are traveling via car on roads and bridges, and then proportionally on trains, I think we'd find out that we wouldn't be funding trains hardly at all, and we'd have the best road and bridge infrastructure in the country. But unfortunately, we've gotten distracted by things that we think are going to help people that have been epic failures. And I'm just trying to prevent another epic failure from taking money away from our road and bridge infrastructure. And I've been driving around the city of St. Paul here this winter as we've been in session, and I don't know if any of you noticed any potholes around the city at all. So there is need for our dollars to be used to improve our transportation infrastructure. So I think this is just an opportunity for us to prevent those dollars either now or in the future from funding something that frankly I think most would consider a boondoggle, a waste of money, and something that really isn't going to achieve any of the goals which I think the folks that are planning it would like. And unfortunately, we shouldn't be funding projects like this just to pay engineers commissions and designers commissions and perpetuating this sort of requests that, revolving door of requests that happen here at the legislature. So ask members to vote in favor of this amendment. Let's just make a statement now that we want our transportation dollars now and in the future to go towards our transportation infrastructure and not towards these sort of projects. So I'd appreciate a green vote. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson P.H. moves to amend House Law number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A69.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson, to the A69.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Well, this amendment is kind of like deja vu for those of you who have been around here for a number of years. It deals with the maintenance of the road ditches, the right-of-ways in our state highway system. By the way, that's about 12,000 miles of state highway roadway. You know, going back, I think it was 2017 when MnDOT tried to implement a different plan for managing our road ditches. And for years, it had been kind of a tradition for a lot of farmers who took care of the ditches adjacent to their property by mowing them and putting up the hay and getting some feed out of it, and also saving MnDOT some time and money as well by maintaining those sections of land that they had their land next to. Yeah, we've had programs like roadsides for wildlife and highway sponsorship programs to kind of deal with this. And the new one in this bill is called Highways for Habitat. And it has some good ideas in it. It calls for standards, management standards, and I think they're fine. Seed and vegetation selection, avoiding the use of pesticides in some of these ditches. And what this amendment does, it just adds another criteria that attention be given to the farmers who for years been mowing these road ditches and putting up the hay for feed. So basically, Madam Speaker, members, that's what this amendment does. It adds a priority for the issuance of permits for the fellows, the farmers doing haying and cutting the grass in these ditches. And Madam Speaker, I would ask for a roll call.
Representative Anderson requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? There are 15 hands. There will be a roll call. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the A69 amendment really turns the Highways for Habitat program into a Highways for Haying program. So it turns it, when you look at where the amendment goes, it's putting a prioritization in for haying or for harvesting. And the purpose of the Highways for Habitat program is habitat, not harvesting. And so, yes, haying can be management, but prioritizing haying actually provides the private use of public property. So I would ask for a no vote on the A69 amendment.
The member from the member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. That corridor also happens to be the corridor of probably the most dangerous vehicle for that habitat as well. And so we could talk about the corridors as being for habitat. It is also dangerous for that very same habitat. And I think that's something that we can also deal with in other ways and provide other habitat sources. So I would recommend a green vote.
Seeing Representative Anderson.
Thanks again, Madam Speaker. Yeah, I'm not advocating for every mile of road ditch to be hayed and cut for grass, but again, this program here doesn't really specify how many of these 12,000 miles of roadway are going to be set aside for habitat. And as Representative Petersburg mentioned, I sometimes have to scratch my head that we want to make wildlife habitat 15 feet away from an 80,000-pound Peterbilt going down the road. You know who's going to come in second if a deer or a raccoon or skunk would happen to meet up with a Peterbilt. It's not going to be the animal. So, and I've often thought that the DNR has about 7 or 8 million acres that they control and manage. Let's work on habitat on those millions of acres, not these 255,000 acres of MnDOT right-of-way. Put them in the right place. There's a place for habitat. We all support that. But really, is our roadside ditches, is that the best place to encourage wildlife and pollinator habitat? I would say please support this amendment and go green on this vote.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hudella moves to amend House File Number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A54.
Member from Dakota, Representative Hudella.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, does everybody remember Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? That, of course we do. That timeless children's classic. I was more of an electric company guy myself, but I caught some episodes. And I remember Mr. Rogers had a train. He even named that train Trolley. It was on just about every episode. There was always a feel-good moment around it. It was just super popular. And do you know why that train was so popular and worked so well for Mr. Rogers? It's because Mr. Rogers didn't have to worry about things like fare box recovery. He didn't have to worry about rampant crime on the trolley. Mr. Rogers didn't have to worry about Met Council mismanaging Trolley and creating a situation where Trolley was 10 years behind on schedule, $1.5 billion over budget. Can you imagine that show would have gone under if they would have gone $1.5 billion over budget? So the only thing really that Trolley and many of our light rail projects right now, but Southwest Light Rail in particular, had in common is nobody's ridden either in a decade when really they could have. So what I'm asking for today is to put in this amendment that keeps the prohibition on Southwest Light Rail funding in place. It's due to expire in about a year. And I just wanted to, I wasn't here when that prohibition went into place, but I've just wanted to learn a little bit more. So, Madam Speaker, I'm wondering if Representative Nash would yield to a question.
He will yield. Representative Hudella.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Nash, I know you've been around for a little bit, and you probably know about this prohibition on the Southwest Light Rail funding, so I wonder if you could just enlighten me for just a minute.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hudella, first, great intro. I love it. Yes, I was around in 2017 when we passed the bill to take the state off the hook for funding, and in fact, it was my bill. And it's proof that you can have great inspiration when you're out in the deer woods and you don't see any deer. You sit around and you ponder things. And I brought the bill, and Chair Torkelson was the transportation chair. And we recognized that there was going to be an impending problem with Southwest Light Rail. We were already seeing that it was going to have delays and cost overruns. It was very problematic. Chair Hornstein and I actually attended a meeting talking about some of the problems that it was going to cause. And we were able to get the bill passed after we held the Senate's hand and told them it was going to be okay. We passed the bill, and the governor got it signed, and then Speaker Doubt helped us make sure that it got all the way through the process. And I think what it wound up doing was it took, I think, it was like $125 million out of the formula that was going to go to that. And it basically said, Hennepin County, this will be your project.
Now, what has happened is the foresight that I had in the deer stand turned out to be spot on, that it was going to be a problem, that we didn't want the state paying for any of it. And I wholly support your amendment, because even though there's going to be an oversight commission and there's going to be some things that may change, we don't have any really definitive answers as to that it won't still have problems. And I think it's best to keep the state off the hook. So I fully support your amendment, Representative Hudella.
I thought for sure he was going to ask you if you were a Mr. Rogers or an electric company guy. Representative Nash.
Madam Speaker, I will always be a Mr. Rogers guy.
There we go.
And
Representative
I
Hudella.
have a trolley on my desk.
What do you know? Representative Hudella.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a couple quick other things before I wrap it up here. Recent report from OLA, lots of problems identified from our independent auditors. Just one quick line, the council did not, referencing Met Council, did not hold its civil construction contractor accountable for failures to provide an acceptable project schedule. The council has also not been fully transparent about the project delays and cost increases. Members, there's a lot of other ways to finish funding this project, and I don't think our state should be on the hook for it. There's federal government dollars, the Hennepin County chunk of financing. I just think that both of these trains, Trolley and the Southwest Light Rail, live in a land of make-believe, and while Trolley may be great for Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, the Southwest Light Rail is not good for our neighborhood. And Madam Speaker, I'd like to request
Representative
a roll call.
Hudella requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, it has not been a beautiful day in my neighborhood, which is the Cedar Isles Dean neighborhood of Minneapolis, where Southwest Light Rail comes through. There's a lot of anger and a lot of frustration, and I'm sympathetic to your goals here. However, that is why we put a prohibition for a little over a year on the use of the sales tax. But the reason I'm asking for a no vote here is we want to make sure that we get all the information from the legislative auditor that we need. There's going to be 2 more reports coming out. The next one is about finances, which directly relates to what you're talking about. And we also have a very vigorous Met Council reform position in this bill. So for those reasons, I'd ask for a no vote. But yes, this is a very fraught project and needs even more oversight, which we put into this bill, more reporting, and this prohibition. So again, sympathetic, but I'll ask for no vote so we can get the information from the auditor that we need.
The member from Dakota, Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I support the Hudella amendment. One of the things that Mr. Rogers Trolley did have in common with our trains is that they're usually empty. And while that's funny, the legislature, respectfully, Chair Hornstein, when we talk about all these lines, is that the legislature needs to recognize and should pursue a comprehensive post-pandemic study of the existing and future transit needs and how they're being used, and analyze the strategies and goals to consider the emerging employment and commuting needs and technology trends before we expand the system. We have a record surplus, but we're still not fully meeting all the desires of our road and bridge system. This bill has $3.5 billion in tax increases, and we're looking at expanding new lines, and what we should be doing is taking a look at our transit system, what's working, where we're going. We wouldn't have problems like the Southwest Light Rail. And the funding in this amendment was the start, or one of the provisions in the amendment with Southwest Light Rail is that the local partners pay the operating costs and the state is off the hook for it, so that we can focus on kind of the bones in our roads and bridges and not have an overbuilt out system that people aren't riding. If the locals want to create new guide rails, new lines, new extensions, they need to can't just come to the state, we'll help them pay for it, and then we're stuck with the hook for operating the ongoing cost of it forever. And you don't have to look much farther than the Anoka and Becker in the North Star line, the Green Line extension, the problems that we're having, your Southwest extension. We need to get the state and keep the state out of operating costs on these lines and rein in and analyze what we're doing before we expand more, and we wouldn't be taxing Minnesotans $3.5 billion in taxes that are in this bill. Minnesotans are getting run over, and they're saying, please hit the brakes before we expand some more. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Katiz-Watun.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I like to say, most people say that the Southwest Light Rail ends in Eden Prairie, but I like to say that it begins in Eden Prairie. And I invite you all to be my neighbor. The Mr. Rogers neighborhood still lives on today in the form of Daniel Tiger's neighborhood. And I represent 4 very close in proximity, small constituents who are both Mr. Rogers, Daniel Tiger neighborhood fans, but also transit and train enthusiasts in Eden Prairie. And one of the really important lessons that Mr. Rogers had been instilling in us throughout my lifetime and now on to my children as well is lessons of kindness, respect, and dreaming big dreams. And so I'm going to vote with the chair. I'm going to vote no. We are extremely frustrated on how this process has continued to roll out, but I ask you to vote no with the chair and don't destroy the train and transit dreams of the young children in Eden Prairie along the Southwest Light Rail and across the state of Minnesota.
The member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm not sure the whole story has actually been heard yet. And nothing in this amendment says the Southwest Light Rail shouldn't go forward or shouldn't be done. What it said is, what is the risk to the state? So I want to go back to when we made this moratorium put in place. I was on the Transportation Committee at the time. The project was originally designed to be about between $900 million and $1 billion, okay, to get this done. It went to the federal government. That was given approval. Shortly after that, we got an update, and oops, it was going to be almost $2 billion. Well, that's quite large in regards to that. At least it was $2.5 billion or something like that. It was a big change. We said, whoa, wait a minute, something's not right here. You need to figure this out. They said, no, we're going to move forward with it anyway. So we said, the moratorium says, that's fine, but we're not going to be exposing the state to any more dollars for it. They said, that's fine, we'll figure it out. CTIB got disbanded, dollars were raised, there was more tax dollars and sales tax going from metropolitan areas, specifically Hennepin County, and they went ahead with the project with our basically disapproval, okay? So now here we are later in which the bill doesn't say that we're going to give money. What it said was that if the Met Council has a governance change, that repeal would be eliminated. But for me, I don't see the basis for that prohibition hasn't changed whether the governance changes or not, right? I mean, they went ahead with it. If you vote no on this bill and don't put this on, what you're telling people out there, agencies, cities, et cetera, is when the state has an ultimatum, later on, maybe you can get them to back down. That's not what we should be doing here. If we're giving guidance and we're giving our dollars for projects, they should be able to fill those requirements. So please vote green for this bill. Let's stand up for what agreements we've made, and let's tell whoever that say, this is agreement that you made, you went ahead with the project, understanding you weren't going to get any more dollars for it. All we're doing is reinforcing the fact that that's the decision that they made and and we should move forward with that. Thank you.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate that. I think that there is bipartisan understanding with the funding problems for Southwest Light Rail. It has clearly been a massive problem, massive overruns, the cost is out of control. But even before all of that happened, this body had the foresight to say that the state of Minnesota, Minnesota taxpayers should not be on the hook to operate Southwest Light Rail. Because if it cannot be self-sustaining, we don't need it. We shouldn't have it. And I just want to, and I appreciate Representative Hornstein and his thoughtfulness on this, but I will say, I'm not sure what other information we need. We have a lot of information, particularly when it comes to the cost of light rail and commuter rail. And the fare box recovery right now on light rail is about 8%. 8%, that's what we get back. It doesn't come anywhere close to covering the costs. And we should demand that if we are going to have light rail and commuter rail in the state of Minnesota, it should at least be financially viable. And the state of Minnesota, the taxpayers should not be on the hook for these costs. Right now, we are subsidizing every trip on the light rail, every trip in the ballpark of $5 to $8. That is every rider per trip. So if it's a round trip, 10 to 16 bucks. And I tell you what, if you want to talk commuter rail, the fare box recovery is 2%. We are subsidizing every single ride to the tune of $150 to $200. That is the cost to the taxpayers to run these lines. Representative Hudella is exactly right. We should keep this language and protect the taxpayers of Minnesota. Frankly, this bill already acknowledges that we don't have a lot of respect for the taxpayer. This bill has $3.5 billion in tax increases already. $3.5 billion. We are increasing taxes in this bill. And if we do not take the Hudella amendment, and if we continue with the language in the underlying bill that says we will subsidize Southwest Light Rail, we're going to need to hike our taxes a heck of a lot more than $3.5 billion. This is a good amendment. We should take it.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the Hudella amendment. And as a resident of Hennepin County, I honestly think it doesn't go far enough. I get that the state taxpayers don't want to be on the hook for the Southwest Light Rail, but neither do the people in District 37A. My taxpayers, and I represent Western Maple Grove, Corcoran, Loretto, Independence, Greenfield, Medina, and Maple Plain. They are not going to get any benefit out of this. And when you look at the graph of who pays the taxes in Hennepin County versus what they get back for roads and bridges and transit, it is crazy. All the other bar graphs are like this. My District 7 is like this. And we already feel completely neglected for the needs of our communities, because I represent these very small towns that have very different transportation needs than most of Hennepin County. But yet my taxpayers, especially through this 7-county metro sales tax, are going to be on the hook. And believe me, I believe that's why this metro sales tax is in there. So they're going to raise the metro county sales tax 0.75%, and 83% of that money is going to transit. So that is a way they're going to try to get metro payers to pay for this boondoggle. And members, this is not the answer. Increasing taxes and putting more money after bad is not the right thing to do. What we should be doing, I humbly submit to the chairman, who I know has worked on this a lot, is that we should be stopping all new investment in these light rail projects until we figure out what has happened here on Southwest Light Rail, so that we don't make these same mistakes again. We should not be putting a penny into that blue line extension. And we should not be putting more money into developing other lines. Members, I'm for bus rapid transit. I think there's lots of other ways we can address the real transit needs of the metro, and they are real. But putting more money into fixed light rail stations and rail is not helpful. A couple other ideas is there's $194 million towards a passenger train to Duluth. Again, I don't see the demand there. I don't see the economics of that working. As Representative New Brindley said, the consideration, $4 million for implementing a passenger train to Fargo and extending the North Star commuter line, which is already losing so much money. We should not be putting more money into these failed projects, and instead we should be using that money to figure out how to pay off what's wrong with Southwest Light Rail and not start anything new. So Representative Hudella, I appreciate you're trying to do this, but I honestly don't think it goes far enough. And I think members, as a body, we have to seriously think about how we are prioritizing these fixed light rail transit projects going forward. Commuter patterns have changed dramatically since COVID. People are not commuting into the city for their jobs anymore. So we have to catch up with reality and change how we're viewing the transit needs. Thank you, members.
The member from Isanti, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I have to confess, I don't sit on the Transportation Committee, so I was unaware of this provision until I'm listening to the debate on the House floor, and I just started asking my members, they're doing what? We already went through this. Last year, we voted unanimously, not quite unanimously, there was one member who had a major donor who was the project manager of Southwest Light Rail who voted not to. But the rest of us, every other member of the House of Representatives voted to audit Southwest Light Rail. It's probably the most bipartisan thing we've done, and we don't even have the results back yet of the audit. I was the one who negotiated this agreement back when we did it when I was Speaker. We dissolved CTIB, they dissolved themselves, but many of the counties in CTIB, and this was the issue, they didn't want to fund Southwest Light Rail because they knew what a disaster it was going to be. And they were right, and we were right, and we warned you. And last year, you know that we were right because you all voted to audit Southwest Light Rail because it's been a disaster. But the agreement was that the state would fund zero of the operations, none of the operations of Southwest Light Rail, and that we would dissolve CTIB so that Hennepin and Ramsey County could keep their half-cent sales tax, and if they wanted Southwest Light Rail, they could fund it. And they agreed to that. And that's what we proceeded with. And the other counties got to keep their half-cent and they could spend it on what they wanted to. And now you want to go back on that agreement. You want to pull this, repeal the prohibition of funding on Southwest Light Rail? Is that what's in the bill, Chair?
Would you like him to yield?
I would like him to yield. He can tell me.
He will
that's
yield.
What I understand.
Representative
maybe I'm wrong.
Hornstein.
Now we're good? All right. Thank you. Madam Speaker, Representative Dowd, so what we have in our bill is a prohibition of the use of this sales tax for the purposes of Southwest Light Rail for a little over a year from now. And we have a number of options heading into next year once we get the final reports and legislative recommendations from the auditor, because we did something extraordinary. You're right, Representative Dowd. We asked the auditor to do 17 things in statute, and they're working on that. We also have a very significant, for the first time, Met Council reform plan. So we are actually prohibiting the use of sales tax money for Southwest until we get those final recommendations back from the auditor. And then the legislature can do what it needs to do and wants to do, hopefully on a bipartisan basis moving forward. Maybe we do something similar to what Representative Nash did a number of years ago.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hornstein, I have a lot of respect for you. There is a current prohibition in statute right now that is permanent on any state dollars being used for the operation of Southwest Light Rail. You're changing that, right?
Representative Dowd, would you like him to yield again?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'll suffice
Representative Dowd.
I'll suffice with the head nods.
It's just better if we do things via the microphone so that everybody who's observing the proceedings can
Sure.
hear the questions and the answers for those who may not be able to see the head nods who are viewing the camera on the feed would only be on you at this point. Representative Dowd.
I think I'm reading the language right now. I think I understand what it says. But I'll ask him for a clarification if it's okay, Madam Speaker.
Representative Hornstein will yield. Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Hornstein. So this says the council is prohibited from spending sales tax revenue on Southwest Light Rail, and you're telling me that that's for 1 year. This does not impact the state dollars that we prohibited 5 years ago or whatever it was. That prohibition is still in place. No state dollars can be used for Southwest Light Rail. Is that still correct?
Representative Hornstein.
That is correct. There is a cap on capital dollars. That was Representative Nash's bill. And this relates to the sales tax, which is not state dollars.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My blood pressure came down a little bit, so thank you for that. Members, people are going to come and ask you to fund projects, and there are going to be people that support them, and there are going to be people that are against them. And I can hear in the conversation today that there are people in your communities, yours, Mr. Chairman, that this is going to run right through, that do not want this project and are very concerned about it. And I'm sure that you have others that really want it, right? But it's our job as elected officials to decide if this is the best use of tax dollars. And we have talked about this project. When I was the Speaker of the House, I tried to do everything I could to kill this thing. And I just couldn't get it done. And I tried, believe me, and you know I tried. The best I could do was get a prohibition of tax dollars from being used, state tax dollars from being used for this at all. And we dissolved CTIB, and we said, Hennepin County, if you want to fund this, and Ramsey County, if you want to fund this, you go ahead and fund the operations, but we are not going to, because we knew it was going to be a disaster. And it has actually been worse than I thought it was going to be, and I don't think we've seen the end of the bad news on this project. I said it at the time, I said it before that. Look up the rail project in Hawaii, the one in Honolulu. You want to see the most disastrous project. These projects just don't, first of all, they don't work. Nobody rides them. They don't get the ridership. The ridership estimates on every one of these projects when they're selling it to you has been overblown. They always estimate that all these people are going to ride these projects, and that's what's going to make it a successful project. There hasn't been a single project that has been anywhere near the ridership estimates. And North Star right now that goes up to I think it goes to Big Lake, they're at like a 1/10 of the ridership they were when we were subsidizing $44 per ride each direction, $88 per person per day we were subsidizing. We've got bus rapid transit that we subsidize like $1.20 per rider. You want to invest in something that is good and get our support? Let's invest in that stuff. Those bus lines can be, and the great news about the bus lines is you can move them if the need and demand moves. But you can't pick up the rails and move these trains. These projects are disastrous, and they're eating up transportation dollars that could be used to fix our road and bridge infrastructure, and it literally is the worst second worst public policy I've seen in 2 days here in the legislature, okay? And we warned you about it then. You know, we all voted unanimously to audit this thing. Now we've got an audit that we're waiting for. This is your opportunity that we be consistent and just say, let's not fund this thing at all. I will mark my words and write this down that I said this today. We would still be better off today to kill this project than to let it go forward. We should cut our losses and kill this project. You look up the project in Hawaii. This project's been under construction for like 20 plus years. And it got to the point where the technology changed so much that they had to stop, redesign the whole project, come up with a new one, and then continue construction on a whole different technology. And it's still not expected to open until, I think, 2032 or something, or 2035. It's like 10 years at the soonest from opening, and it's been under construction for 20 years. And it's like, I don't know, 800, 900, 1,000% over budget. It's like $13 billion or something they've spent on this thing. I haven't looked it up recently, but it just gets worse and worse and worse. And that's what has happened with Southwest Light Rail. And while they're planning Southwest Light Rail, they're out holding public hearings on all these other lines. What's the one called that goes up to Botno? Now they call it Blue Line, Botno. It is not great. And if you want to find out, I got some relatives that live along this thing, and they go to the public hearings. They get so frustrated. You know what we do now, members? They don't allow public hearings anymore. You know what they do? Open houses. So instead of going and hearing what other people think about this project, you can go and tell one person, who, by the way, doesn't listen to you. You can tell one person, hey, I don't like the routing of this project, or I don't like that it's going to take some right away from this particular business. But the reality is, they don't listen. And it's all designed to not take any public input. They don't have public meetings anymore where you can show up and stand up in front of a group and say, hey, this is a bad deal, and I don't think it should go forward. And your neighbors will hear what you say, and they'll say, you know what, I don't either. The whole thing is designed for you to think you're the only person that doesn't support it, and everybody else supports it. We need to change that. We need a bill in this legislature that says you need to have a public hearing, a real public hearing in an open meeting where all of the attendees can hear the opinions of all the other attendees, and not hide it in these open houses that they're having now. That is not good public policy, and that's why we've had all the problems we've had on Southwest Light Rail, because they don't have public hearings. They don't take public input. They have open houses now. So while we have warned you time and time again that this project is a bad project, and while they're moving forward full steam with this one, they're also moving on a separate track full steam on Botno, the Blue Line. And Minnesotans are the ones who are getting screwed by it. And nobody's listening to them. They show up at the open houses, and they get one person they could talk to, and the person says, oh yeah, okay, well, we'll take your opinion, we'll write it down. And then they take that right into the trash can. That's what they do with it. And they move full steam ahead with a project that nobody wants, and we shouldn't be funding. And you know what? The people who are taking those opinions at the open houses are the same people who are making money on these projects. They're the engineers who are getting paid on these projects. And there's probably a couple people from MnDOT there too. But we've got hundreds of people in these office buildings working on these projects that nobody wants, that we don't fund enough public safety to keep them safe. Nobody's riding them, and we're going to continue to dump money in them. This is your opportunity. Thank you, Representative Hudella, for bringing this forward. This is your opportunity to stop the nonsense and stop this money from going into this endless, deep hole money pit called Southwest Light Rail. So enough is enough. And unfortunately, I think this isn't the last time I'm going to stand on the House floor and warn you about what will happen. But mark my words, write it down on your calendar, that today Kurt Doubt said we should have killed this thing once and for all, been done with it, cut our losses, and it would be cheaper. And any money we've collected from the feds, we should just pay it back to the feds, cut our losses, and mothball this thing. We should have done it a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and 5 years ago. Let's not let another year go by where we let tax dollars just get wasted on a project nobody wants and nobody's going to ride. So let's be done with this thing. This is your opportunity. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There There being 62 ayes and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Murphy moves to amend House File Number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A70.
Representative Murphy, to-year amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My amendment deals with the vehicle sales tax increase. And so this is a $215 million tax. Again, we have a $3.5 billion increase to this bill. It's a 30% increase. This is really important to small businesses, especially small auto dealers. And they're very interested in this, and this bill will be scored by the NFIB. And I would also like a roll call.
Representative Murphy requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you. I'm passing out, have the pages pass out a couple of handouts that really illustrate what's happened to the auto industry and really what's happened with their taxes over the last few years. In 2019, auto retailers in Minnesota had their best retail year. And since then, sales have dropped 28%. In that same time, their sales tax has gone up 22%. And so it puts them in a really tough position. You'll look and see the big disparity when you get the graph, but it was a record year in 2019 in terms of their auto sales, and they've taken a big discount back. The other graph shows us versus our neighboring counties, our neighboring states. And our neighboring states have a different way of looking at this vehicle sales tax. We're 27% higher than our neighboring states. And with this tax, we'll be 31% higher than our neighboring states. And that'll put us at number 5 in the country in terms of this sales tax for automobiles. So it's definitely putting us in a rough spot. We're at a $215 million tax, and we're not being competitive with our neighboring states. So I would like to see a yes vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Murphy, first of all, happy birthday, Representative Murphy. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Representative Murphy, I also want to thank you. You've been a fantastic, fantastic member of our committee. Members, this is $104 million per biennium or per year for roads and bridges in our state. It's a really important part of our bill. And that's why I would recommend a no vote. This money will go directly to townships, to small cities, to counties, cities, and it's an important part of this legislation. So I would recommend a no vote.
Representative Murphy, I presume there are cupcakes in the retiring room. Representative Murphy.
Well, thank you, and I thought we'd do a little bit better for my birthday than this, but I just want to remind you again, this is a big new tax. It's at a bad time, too, for auto retailers. It's a $215 million tax. It's not like this is a small bill. We're at $3.5 billion increase. It's a 30% increase. It's a huge budget area for us, and this really hurts our auto retailers. It really hurts them from being competitive with their neighbors. It also hurts consumers. We're not in a position where we're very competitive with our neighbors, and it hurts them as well. So I definitely like to see a green vote. This $215 million would do well with our nursing homes. I think this would be a better spot for that money. So anyway, I call for a yes vote. Thank you.
The clerk, the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Did he request a roll call?
He sure did.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Nadeau moves to amend House File Number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A80.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. I'm not going to spend any time talking about what happened in the past, nor am I going to talk about trains. I want to talk about what's happening in the future. And I talk a lot about priorities. I talk a lot about finding balance. And, you know, my amendment is pretty simple. This is an anti-local government mandate bill. And part of the reason that I'm bringing it is I was looking through the language that was added in the bill, and there's not one component of it that would measure effectiveness of this particular mandate. So neither side of the aisle owns the patent on reducing greenhouse gases, improving climate change. We all believe in this. And as a matter of fact, you know, I looked at the Minnesota Department of Commerce and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency just put out a report just this January, where it started talking about, I mean, it was measuring the effect of what we were doing, industry, state, local government, what we were doing to reduce greenhouse gases across the state. And just to remind everybody here, we put these goals in place years ago. 15% of 2005 emissions by 2015, a 30% reduction by 2025, 80% reduction by 2050. The report showed in January that between 2005 and 2020, our greenhouse gas emissions declined by 23%. I mean, if those trends continue, we're well on track to reduce, to hit our goals of 30% by 2025. So instead of sitting here today and talking about putting a mandate on local gov, we should be celebrating the fact that we are actually on track to meeting the goals that we've established. And I don't know why we're not. So electrical generation, a 54% reduction. This year, we basically are going to go zero greenhouse gases by 2040. We're once again on track. The only thing that went up was 14% in apartment buildings and the residential sector. Every other sector has gone down. Every single sector has gone down. We are on track. So what this bill, the language in this bill that I'm asking you to think hard about keeping in is basically going to require that just 181 cities and townships of Minnesota's 854 and 1,750 townships, just 181 comply with this mandate. Just the ones in the Metropolitan Council jurisdiction. So maybe there's no greenhouse gases being emitted in any other part of the state. I don't know. I think it would be difficult to measure, but I think the Department of Commerce and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency have actually maybe taken some of that into account. But we're only going to make 181 cities and some townships comply with this new mandate. I started looking a little bit further. You know, who's developing action plans? Counties are. Interesting. Counties are developing action plans to fight climate change, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Every one of them are talking about transportation-related, waste and material use related, building and energy use. You know, they're all going down this path. They're doing exactly what the legislature has asked them to do. Set those goals, put those strategies in place, and follow them, and then help their partners. Do we really need 45 cities in Hennepin County to have separate action plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? I think about the cities that I represent, Rogers, Dayton, Champlin, very different from St. Louis Park, Golden Valley, Minneapolis. The needs are different, the communities are different. I don't think this one-size-fits-all approach is necessary at all. You know, according to the state agencies that we have required that they measure our effectiveness, we're on track to meet those greenhouse gas reduction goals, Madam Speaker. This is something, as I said, we should be celebrating. But here we are, we're creating yet one more mandate on local gov. And these have costs. These have costs. And they cause fights. And if we're gonna force a mandate on local gov, let's do it in a way where it doesn't inject the Metropolitan Council. If you're a developing community, and I have two of the fastest growing communities in the whole county, when we insert the Met Council between our communities and the communities that we build with their local elected officials, it just causes fights. This is tough. This is tough. The Met Council does a great job with wastewater. It's done its best that it can do with so many other things, but we've heard today how they struggle. Let's not add to that struggle, members. You know, we've got 850 cities across this state. Why are we going to treat 181 of them differently? And what's our obsession with mandates? Do we not trust local elected officials to care about our environment? Is that what this is all about? That they're not smart enough? They're not innovative enough? They don't care enough? Is that what this is about? You know, yesterday I listened really closely to Representative Hansen. I really respected his approach. And at the end of his thing, he said, you know, what is the fear that we have of climate change? And is it that economic uncertainty? And he went down that line, and I really respected that. And I thought about that a lot. And I don't think, at least I'll speak for myself, I don't fear climate change. I don't fear economic uncertainty. I do fear that we don't reach the balance that we're trying to achieve. And I said, and that's what I think is wrong with this particular language in this bill, Representative Hornstein. I don't think it focuses on the efforts that are currently being done to achieve the goals that this legislature has put in place and that they're achieving, and it basically wants them to do more. And when we talk about those strategies, they're all the same. I mean, MnDOT has a climate action plan. Met Council has one. A lot of cities do. The counties do. They all talk about reducing vehicle miles traveled, promoting electrical vehicle infrastructure, using transportation investments to support broader goals, you know, preventing food waste and diverting organic material. They're all the same. So I suppose you could argue that, well, if they're all the same, they all need to just put it in there and we'll all be fine. But I just don't believe that our communities are all the same, Representative Hornstein. They're all different, and they're developing at different times. And we should help them develop in a way that is efficient and effective, that cuts greenhouse gases, that protects our environment, both water, air, and everything else, rather than just slamming another mandate on them and saying, you know what, this is what you're going to do. Because we're going to treat you the same way as we're going to treat a community that developed 100 years ago, that has a lot more, they have a lot more work that they can do, but we're going to treat you the same. And that's wrong. So members, and Madam Chair, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Representative Nadeau asks for a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Nadeau.
And hopefully everyone will vote yes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Nadeau, for the amendment. And I appreciate your real concern and focus on measuring effectiveness, and actually would be interested in talking about that with you further. That said, this amendment would basically eliminate the part of the bill that is a responsible and flexible way for Met Council to build land use and climate considerations into the existing and well-known comprehensive planning process that cities will start working on in 2026. So please vote no.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Nadeau.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Representative Kraft. And I was gonna leave that out of it. I mean, the changes that that are in this language. Once again, local units of government They have been doing this for years. Years. You know, Met Council started in, what, 1967? When we didn't, there wasn't even a map that allowed a gravel road in Greenfield to attach to another gravel road in Maple Grove. Technology's changed. Cities within the metropolitan district, they work together every day on every issue. They share water resources. They share storm sewer. It's time, and again, I know there's another bill that's going to hopefully address this in the future with the Met Council, and thank you, Representative Hornstein. I will help in any way possible. But you know what? The time for this is over. It's done. So vote yes, members. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment.
Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 59 ayes and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. Representative Kraft.
My vote wasn't registered. I would like to vote no, if I may.
Kraft votes no.
Kraft votes no.
Are there any other members wishing to vote?
So 59, 68.
There being 59 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail and the A80 amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House Law number 2887, the third and gross one as amended. The amendment is coded A47.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative West, to explain the A47 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A47 amendment is the best amendment we have today. It repeals the 0.75% metro area sales tax. Now, what we hear every single time we talk about eliminating a tax is, well, we need these monies to rebuild our failing roads. Have you been outside? Look at these massive potholes. This is terrible. Yes, the roads are terrible, but this tax, that's a tax on everyone, every living soul in the 7-county metro area. 5/6 of it is for transit. That's not fixing our roads. That's for transit. 1/6 is for our roads. So this tax over the next 4 years is over $2 billion. $2 billion. And that might not be so bad if it was for fixing roads and potholes, but only a smidgen is for fixing roads and potholes. Now you might say, well, it's only a 0.75% increase. That's not so bad. Well, we have many other bills here that we're going to hear and pass, most likely, that raise sales taxes for numerous things. Later today, we're going to hear a 1/4 cent increase. We have local use sales tax increases that are going to be put towards the cities. So, for example, if all these sales tax proposals go through, and they're in bills that are moving, Minneapolis, so that's not our constituents, that's your constituents. Minneapolis will have a sales tax of 9%. 9%. That's something you'd see on the East Coast, not in the Midwest, not in Minnesota. But it still is only 0.75, so maybe that's not so bad, even though it's over $2 billion. Last year, inflation was at 8.54% on the year. 8.54%. So if you didn't get a raise to match that, say most people got maybe a 3% raise, so we'll take that out. Inflation hit them, their money's worth 5.5% less. This adds another 0.75 onto that. And if they're unlucky enough to live in Minneapolis, 8.25 on top of that. That is a serious amount of money. That's a serious burden. For many of us here, that isn't a burden. You know, a lot of people here have jobs outside the legislature. Even though legislature is not where you come to get rich, there's a lot of people here who work outside here, like maybe Representative Greg Davids. And that's not a lot of money to Representative Greg Davids. But that is a serious amount of money to low-income folks, a serious amount of money. And while everybody's getting slammed by inflation, this tax is primarily for transit and only a little bit for maintaining our roads. It hits everybody in the 7-county metro area. And with 5/6 of this for transit, well, I can tell you people in Linwood Township, people in the northern part of my county aren't going to see a dime of that, but they're going to pay it just the same as somebody in Minneapolis who probably does use transit. So it's an unfair tax. It's a tax on everybody when they can least afford it, because just last month, inflation was at 6.04%. Inflation isn't over. It's still happening. Your dollar's being devalued every day, and this is just adding another burden on top of burden on top of burden. This bill also has $2 billion of other taxes in it. It's all these taxes. These aren't taxes on the rich. These aren't taxes on the 1%. These are taxes on regular people. Everybody pays these taxes. So, here's a chance for us to fix this. We don't need this. We have a $20 billion budget surplus, folks. Let's use this money in the surplus to fix our roads, and you can use it for transit too. But this sales tax is coming at the wrong time when 60% of Americans, 60%, are living paycheck to paycheck. So not only is inflation hitting them, if you're already living paycheck to paycheck, this adds to that, and you'll be taking credit card debt upon credit card debt. You won't be able to afford anything, even though, hey, your bus will run on time if we can pass this amendment. So members, I urge you to support this amendment because it's the wrong time for the amendment. It's unfair because it hits everybody the same, even though people will utilize it vastly differently. And we have $20 billion. Let's use that $20 billion for the people of Minnesota and not raise taxes even more. And, Madam Speaker, I would request a roll call.
Representative West requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion on the West Amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd recommend a no vote. Members, just a few minutes ago, Representative Dow was talking about what we need in terms of transit, and it was a little bit disorienting to me because I was agreeing with him. He was talking about bus rapid transit, something that both sides of the aisle have historically agreed to. If you look at page 58 in the bill, you will see the legislative intent. We've listed out the uses for this sales tax. First and foremost, local buses. We have transit safety, another bipartisan initiative. We have bus accessibility at transit stops and transit centers, transit shelter replacement. Again, expansion of BRT capital and maintenance and expenses for arterial bus rapid transit, highway bus rapid transit. That's the uses for this. And microtransit as well, which I think Representative West keeps in. Very, very important and helpful to the entire region, including the suburbs. So everyone will benefit from this. It's the nuts and bolts of our transit system. That's what this is designed for. So that's why I would recommend a strong no vote on this amendment.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would request a green vote, and here's a couple of reasons why. The bulk of these dollars that are raised are going to be distributed through Met Council and by the Met Council and used for them. And so in committee, I asked the representative why they asked for 0.75% and what were they going to do with it. And we were informed that, well, they really only asked for the 1/8% that was in the governor's proposal, and they didn't have any definite answer on where they were going to put it, but they'd probably use it for some of their deficit cliffs into the future. And here we're talking about, in the same bill, the idea that we need to study and try to figure out whether or not the governance for the Metropolitan Planning Organization and transit, if Met Council is the right place to have that. Well, I think, again, that this may be a situation where maybe we put the cart before the horse. Here we have $1 billion a biennium going to the Met Council through this increase in taxes to an organization that we're not sure as a body is the proper place to do it, and for an expansion on transit in which we still aren't sure whether or not the behaviors of transit ridership is changing or going to go on the same or not. Now, we are hearing studies. The last one I saw was that Minneapolis has the largest business vacancy in the United States. That's vacancy because there just isn't business downtown. Workers and so forth aren't down there working, so they're not being involved with retail, et cetera. So this really makes a common sense that this may not be the time to put it, or certainly not at this level, because it's quite large and it's quite regressive, and it's going to impact a lot of people. So please vote green for this amendment. It's a common sense amendment. It actually keeps us in the realm of deciding where we go first. Let's be pragmatic. Let's make common sense all about it. So please vote green.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just thank you, Representative West, for bringing the amendment. I just wanted to, I reached out to some of the county commissioners in Anoka County today. So I think there are a few on the other side of the aisle that are in Anoka County. And so I just wanted to share this publicly. This is their response when I asked about did you request this sales tax? And they said, definitely from the county's point of view, we don't want the sales tax increase, especially when we don't have control of what it gets spent on. We know they plan for most of the revenue to go for transit and not roads. Our county is continuing to grow, and we need road capacity increases more than we need any transit. And they're also concerned that counties like Sherburne and Isanti, that are our bordering counties, that we will lose revenue, local revenue, our businesses will, because people will just go to the businesses in those counties to save on the sales tax. And one of the final things, and this county commissioner did email me as well, one of the other things that this person said is that I think it's hard to convince people that we need to increase taxes when we are sitting on an historic surplus. In talking with the three chambers of commerce that this county commissioner belongs to, they're extremely concerned. Members, this is going to put the 5 county collar counties at a disadvantage when they already really are at a disadvantage when it comes to getting road funding. And they sent me a chart, and I haven't had time to, since I just got this email, I haven't had time to sign it and distribute it, but the 5 metro counties, according to this, as far as trunk highway funds, they get 13% of all the state funding for trunk highway funds. Greater Minnesota gets 59%, and the 2 core counties of Hennepin and Ramsey get 28%. So the 5 collar counties are already being, treated like the ugly stepchild when it comes to funding, and this county, this sales tax is not going to help. They don't need money for transit. They need money for road expansions, and please vote for the West Amendment. Do what's right for your local area, but even if you're a rural member, and I think we have most of those folks, do what's right to even out the playing field here a little bit. You know, those 5 counties contain a lot of population and are fast growing, and we're only getting 13% of the trunk highway funds. The 0.75% sales tax increase in Anoka County is not going to go to improve that situation. So please vote yes on the West Amendment.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you, Representative West, for the amendment. As I was looking through this, I thought, frankly, it's not even that important what all of this $2 billion goes towards. Although I did go to that section of the bill, Representative Horstein, and I appreciate you pointing us in the right direction. And it goes for things like bus rapid transit, transit centers and stops, shelter replacement, BRT lines, bus procurement, and some other things as well. But interestingly, none of those things need a tax increase to pay for them. None of them. Because as it turns out, we have a $17.5 billion budget surplus. $17.5 billion, and it is never enough. It is never enough for our Democrat colleagues, shockingly so. And you know, I get it. I was reading an article yesterday in MinPost, and it was quoting our Democrat friends saying, well, but you know, most of that money is just one-time money. It's not ongoing money. But in MinPost, Peter Callahan and Walker Ornstein wrote an article, and they pointed out that $5.36 billion is ongoing. And even if we set aside the one-time budget surplus, this is still the largest budget surplus in state history, ongoing budget surplus. This is a record surplus, and it is still not enough. We are raising, just through this sales tax, we're not even counting all the other tax increases and fee increases. I'm not even addressing any of those things right now. This tax alone is raising $2 billion in additional revenue just over the next 4 years. $2 billion. And it's just never enough. It is never enough. $2 billion tax increase. I was talking to one of my Democrat colleagues a couple of weeks ago, and she asked me, you know, Ann, why do you have such a problem? Because frankly, I get frustrated that we pay for things for people who don't need us to pay for them. That is really frustrating to me. And she said, but then why do you think we should eliminate Social Security tax for everyone? And I'll tell you, it's really easy. It's because the people who can afford to pay for that tax can also afford to not pay that tax. They don't have to live here. They don't have to stay in the state of Minnesota, and we know they're not. We are bleeding people. We are bleeding our most important capital out of this state. And one of the biggest reasons for that is our tax policy. We're already we're in the top 5, top 10 highest tax state in the entire country. And with the budget the Democrats are passing, we're really shooting for number 1. We're going to be the highest tax state in the entire country. And there are consequences for that. We've seen the consequences already, but those consequences are going to accelerate. The state of Minnesota had a net loss of 20,000 people last year. We exported 20,000 people, our greatest resource, the most important capital our state has. We are losing. We are bleeding, and it's because of policies like this. It is because when we have a record surplus, a record ongoing surplus, we raise taxes, this one tax, by $2 billion. And guess what, folks? We don't need it. We don't need it. The absurdity of raising taxes at a time where we have a record surplus, a record ongoing surplus, is insanity.
The member from Isanti, Representative Johnson. The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House File Number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A55.
The member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A55 amendment allocates $10 million to hire more Metro Transit police officers. And this is incredibly necessary because of the state of crime on our light rail system. We heard in committee, and we've heard in committee for the last 2 years from the Metropolitan Council, where they say, we're trying to hire more police officers. We're doing what we can. They have serious budget constraints, and we need them to hire more police officers for the good of our state and for the good of our transit system. This will give them another $10 million to do so, and it's incredibly needed. You can spend 1 minute, Google light rail Minnesota crime. You will find a litany of stories. You'll see open drug use on trains, multiple assault cases on a regular basis. It's a serious problem. It's such a serious problem, there are people who don't even own cars and depend on light rail that refuse to ride the light rail after dark. This isn't just like, oh, we don't like light rail, we're not going to ride it. This has gotten so bad that people who depend on transit can't use it because they're afraid. So let's take this $10 million and fund the Metro Transit Police to clean up our light rail so people can feel safe and we can get the maximum amount of use out of a light rail system, since we're stuck with it no matter how bad it is. You see that with North Star Light Rail. Let's make sure what we do have built is safe for Minnesotans to use. And Madam Speaker, I request a roll call.
Representative West requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The member from Hennepin, Representative. The member from Scott, Representative Tapke.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and Representative West. This is, I understand where Representative West is coming with on this bill to make sure that we have enough money to fully fund Metro Transit police force, but currently Metro Transit as of today has 109 officers out of the 171 that they have fully funded that are in their staff today. And so we, it's not a money issue. It's not that $10 million will be able to add more. It's a personnel issue. And Metro Transit has recently increased the amount that they pay for police officers in Metro Transit, and they will continue to do that and are having success, and will have another academy this summer to increase those numbers. And so transit is a magnet for folks experiencing addiction issues, experiencing any variety of social issues, and it magnifies that on the transit system. And so we need to have a full complement of police officers also, but helping to make sure that we're giving people the help that they need. And so I ask members to vote against this because an additional $10 million will not help the situation here.
Saying no, the representative from Anoka, Representative West.
I know you want us to be quick, so I will be quick. Just in a 20-minute ride.
I'm free this weekend. Representative West.
Hey, I have not been part of the problem, though, so give me my gold star. I know somebody who had a 20-minute ride on the light rail, and in that 20 minutes, there's, Tapke does have that bill to increase rider code of conduct and make sure people are respecting the law, but just in a 20-minute ride, there's somebody smoking a cigarette. You say, oh, annoying, not too bad. Also, packing a crack pipe. Also, shooting up in a 20-minute ride. This is a serious problem. Maybe $10 million won't solve it, but it's better than nothing. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House Law number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A65.
The member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A65 amendment modifies a Representative Kraft provision in the bill that requires project assessments to include vehicles, miles traveled, and ensure that projects meet greenhouse gas emissions standards. And sure, we could do that, and that might be a positive policy for the state, but we can't have those concerns outweigh safety and congestion. So this just puts in a priority list. If one of these projects being assessed is considered prioritized based on safety, congestion, economic development, or a combination of those, that it isn't subject to this. Because this will make it a whole lot harder to build roads in this state. And that's a massive problem. We want to be able to move around. Minnesotans expect it. And right now, as we know, our roads are in tough shape. And if we start judging every single project, for example, if vehicles miles traveled reduction targets are the established thing when we build transportation projects, in what universe do we not have more vehicle miles traveled when we improve our roads? We don't. So this would disadvantage every road in our districts. So if you have a road project, you don't want this provision. It's a serious problem. We've already seen that a lot of these light rail projects don't work out properly and rarely ever stay within budget. So let's make sure that in the special cases, when they're good for economic development, they're good for congestion, but most importantly, they're good for safety. It's one of the reasons why we are in desperate need to rebuild Highway 65. But I have heard from engineers on this provision specifically. There's a lot of confusion. So I do have several questions if Representative Kraft will yield.
He will yield. Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a couple questions here based on my conversations with engineers. They're very concerned about how do they adapt to this new structure. So a couple easy ones. First is, how many projects do you expect this to impact in the next 4 years?
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative West. First, it doesn't go into effect until February of 2025, so anything before then it doesn't impact. And I don't know exactly how many projects.
Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If Kraft will continue, Representative Kraft will continue to yield.
He will. Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What do you expect is the cost and time delay when a project has to go through these assessments?
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative West, given that there's plenty of time for folks to build this into their process and looking forward at it, that doesn't start until February of 2025, I don't anticipate significant delays.
Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Representative Kraft will continue to yield.
He will. Representative West.
Maybe, okay. I hope you're right about no delays, but if you can answer the question on the costs. And my big concern, the biggest question, as I'm sure you can tell already, is how would this impact a project like Highway 65, which definitely will be done after the enactment date?
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative West. So I don't think this would impact Highway 65 project at all because it will have reached a phase in the project that it would not impact it. Thanks.
Representative West.
Oh my goodness, I hope you are correct. And just one last question, if you will continue to yield, Madam Speaker.
He will yield. Representative West.
So if a project has to go through this and it says that the commissioner must provide some mitigation impacts. So it lists several different assessments the commissioner decides to do, which will obviously, if the commissioner is going to do them and evaluate these projects, it's going to cost some money. but there is no money in this bill for this specific purpose. So where will the money come from to do this? Because I know they can't use trunk highway funds. Trunk highway funds have to be used for trunk highways. Where will the money come for the commissioner to do these impact mitigation measures?
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative West. That is something that actually willing to talk to with MnDOT and folks in counties and how this will work in the coming years. But in general, with having enough time to plan and being able to offset projects, not only with the current project, but they can pair projects that are happening in one region with others in the region or others elsewhere in the state. It's put in place to do it in a maximum flexibility way to minimize additional costs.
Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's really concerning that that's not quite figured out yet, and we're trying to pass this with no money attached off the House floor right now, because our transportation system is already way behind, as we know, and this will add more costs onto every single road project, and it'll make it more difficult to get any road project done. So if you're a member who cares about a road project in your district, I care a lot about Highway 65, and I love that you're saying that, and I hope to the Lord that you are correct. But members, we should adopt this amendment because Highway 65 just this morning had a 3-car crash. I know you all have districts, roads in your districts, that have safety concerns. So we should prioritize those safety concerns over this, because this isn't even ready for prime time. We don't even know where the money's coming from. It's not ready to go, and it's also having trouble over in the Senate. So we shouldn't do this at all, but if we do it, we should at least prioritize safety, because that's what matters most. And Madam Speaker, I request a roll call.
Representative West requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion. The member from Hennepin, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative West. I will say I fundamentally disagree with the premise of the amendment. MnDOT can and will do both greenhouse gas emissions analysis and analysis of safety, congestion reduction, and economic impacts at the same time. This amendment would effectively virtually eliminate the program, and I ask members to vote no.
The member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Representative West, thank you for this fantastic amendment. This is a common sense amendment that will ensure that our roads are safe. We have limited congestion as much as possible and help grow the economic development of our great state of Minnesota, while still considering the greenhouse gas emissions to ensure that our environment is safe as well. One of the common questions that I've been asked really refers to, Ben, you have the state has a $17.5 billion surplus. What are you guys doing with that money, or what would you do to prioritize? And I always go back to infrastructure. And I'm from the great community of Jordan, and we have the last stoplight on Highway 169 from Champlin all the way down to Representative Brand's community of St. Peter. That is 169, for those of you that don't know, is a major corridor of commerce for the state of Minnesota. And that last stoplight is often the spot of major traffic accidents. And we are working through a project now, and Representative Hornstein has been fantastic to work with, Chair Lee, to get the last little bit of funding needed. The City of Jordan, Scott County, the state, and federal partners have come together to get funding to eliminate that stoplight and reduce the congestion. When this greenhouse gas emissions provision was put into the transportation bill, my phone exploded with concern about what does this mean. And I'm glad to hear from Representative Kraft that Highway 65 would not be effective. There's uncertainty for 169, and we have concerns about that. So this amendment would provide clarity for our residents, for our leaders in our local communities at the county level. Members, please vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. we ready for the call of the House?
I think we can be. It might take us 5 minutes to get everyone in the door.
It's coming right up. It's the next amendment.
I want to ask you about that vote.
About which one?
The one calling us all.
Oh, do you want to free pass?
Yeah, maybe. Possible.
Talk to Jamie, and as long as it's okay with him, then it's okay with me. The clerk will close the roll. Schultz votes aye. There being 60 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House Bill number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A89.
Member from Anoka, Representative West, to the A89.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've been very restrained in talking about Highway 65 up until this moment, but now is the time where I will go into great detail, because Highway 65 is the most important thing to the city of Blaine. It is a dangerous road. It's impossible to get through. It divides our city. It takes 14 minutes to cross it in some cases. It is strangling our city. But it's not just about Blaine. It's not just about Blaine. Right off Highway 65 is the National Sports Center. That's a state-owned facility with over 4 million visitors a year. When the USA Cup comes to town, we have over 1,000 soccer teams from dozens of countries come to Blaine. And they come down, they drive up Highway 65, and what is their first experience when they come to our country, in my city? Congestion, traffic. They can't move. And it has gotten, especially on the safety front, which is why I prioritized safety in that last amendment, is there was a 3-car crash just today. We've had city staff just about 2 weeks ago got T-boned. T-boned. And with the money that is allocated in this amendment for Highway 65, it would rebuild 99th Avenue intersection, 105th Avenue intersection, and 109th Avenue intersection with the $25 million that was adopted earlier today, late yesterday. And if this was already done, if this project was done, that T-bone collision for that city staff member would have been impossible because there would have been no road crossing and Highway 65 would have been lifted over. This is incredibly dangerous. Just 5 of the intersections of Highway 65, 5 intersections just this year, 196 crashes. 196 crashes. Right now, you're getting at your desks a letter from the entire City Council and Mayor advocating for $100 to $130 million. And you might say that's a lot. Why should one area, one city get that much money? Well, first, there's money, $30 million for St. Paul for their roads, and those are city roads. Those aren't even state roads. So it appears that this is on the table for everyone. And it needs to be $100, $130 million because the concern is we have $20 billion. We have so much money. It is insane. We can't even really conceptualize how big that is. With the proposed budget that the Democrats are proposing, that money's going to go away. So what are we going to be left with? It's been over a decade since there was serious work on Highway 65. And with the $25 million we adopted last night, that should get 99th started. But that's not going to solve the issue. It is a bigger issue than that. And it's not just Blaine. It's our entire state. This makes our state look bad. It's got massive potholes. It's got horrible traffic, and it's dangerous, as I said. So these people who come, over 4 million visitors to the National Sports Center, are repulsed, I would say. And also, it's preventing Blaine from developing. And you might say, how is a city that's one of the fastest growing cities in the state having trouble developing? Well, if you drive up Highway 65 and you look to your left in Blaine, you actually just see a bunch of trees. There's just trees. There's nothing. Nothing developed. Well, not nothing. There's Mrs. B's Dolls, which is a wonderful doll shop. There's a great pool shop there as well. But there's a ton of undeveloped land. And it's prime real estate. Why, on a major highway in a bustling city with high-income residents, would that not be developed? Especially with housing prices the way they are. Well, it's because nobody will develop the land because Highway 65 is impossible. We've seen businesses grow and die in multiple locations right off Highway 65 because residents can't get off the road. People coming through don't dare get off the road because it'll take so much time to get back on it. It's a serious, it is a statewide concern. It's horrible for the city. It's dangerous. We need to fix this now. And if we don't, it might be another decade before we get another intersection, and another decade after that before we get another intersection. We can't leave this. But I tried to make this fair. I didn't, I originally had an amendment to do $130 million for Highway 65 that I withdrew because the chair was willing to take the amendment for $25 million. So this money comes from $198 million for a new train to Duluth. Now, this train to Duluth will be slower than a car. It'll cost more money than a car. And what are you going to do in Duluth when you don't have a car? This will not see legitimate use, and it's compared to Highway 65, it's going to have tinier usership. 60,000 cars a day on Highway 65. And how many people ride this? Well, right now, the North Star line, which goes from Big Lake to the Twin Stadium, has 300 people a day, compared to 60,000 people a day. So this rail won't be used by a lot of people. We've seen that repeatedly when we build new rail in this state. Highway 65 has a lot of use, as I said. But I do not want it just to be about Highway 65, even though I will talk about it literally all day. I also include in this amendment, so we take the $198 million from this train to Duluth that just isn't going to, we already can tell you, it's going to be like Southwest Light Rail. It's going to be a boondoggle. I guarantee it. So we take that money and put $29 million to Highway 10 between the cities of Clear Lake and St. Cloud. Because that is also a road that desperately needs funding. And we can't just make this about one road. It's $200 million. I know the city of St. Cloud needs that. I'm sure other members here can speak to that even more than I. But it seems strange to me that a representative might prioritize a train to Duluth over a highway that helps the people of their district. There's also $20 million in this amendment for Highway 41 in the city of Chanhassen. Again, I doubt very many people in the city of Chanhassen are going to use a train to Duluth compared to how many use that Highway 41, which also is in desperate need. So it doesn't make any sense that we'd prioritize the very, very few people who would use the $200 million train over the people of St. Cloud and the people of Chanhassen. And you get more for your money. It's $29 million and $20 million. Then we have Highway 10 again. So we've worked hard on Highway 10. The legislature has allocated quite a few dollars to Highway 10 over the years. And we are all very appreciative here in Anoka County. That road was a nightmare, and it is vastly, vastly improved. But it's not done. You'll notice when Highway 10 comes in and hits 35W, it is still congested and unsafe. So there's $30 million in this amendment for a third lane in each direction. That needs to happen. It's a serious congestion and safety issue there. And that basically completes Highway 10. It'll be smooth sailing from 35W well into Elk River and Zimmerman. The bill also has $25 million for Highway 14 in Olmsted County. Now that's even better. So like the people of Chanhassen probably won't use the train to Duluth. The people of Rochester definitely won't use the train to Duluth. But maybe some of them will. But it's $200 million. It's $200 million for something that's slower than a car, costs a lot of money, and you better know it's not just going to be $200 million. It's going to be a whole lot more by the time we're done with it. And a lot of people say, well, we need to spend that $200 million because we leverage it for federal funds. Well, we made that mistake with North Star. And now, because we took federal funds for North Star Rail that 300 people use, that we could buy each of those 300 people a Mercedes E-Class and pay $200 a month for parking down in Minneapolis, and it would be more cost-effective than North Star Light Rail. We took federal money, so if we kill that light rail, we'd have to pay it back. So federal money comes with strings. So when they say it's $200 million, oh, it's not just $200 million. It's going to be an anchor around the necks of this legislature and every community that has to pay for it. And lastly, $20 million for Washington County in Highway 36 and County State Aid Highway 17, also known as Lake Elmo Avenue. That is another horribly congested spot that probably a lot of people here use. Like when 694 is all jammed up, I generally hop off onto 36 and go to Snelling. This is east of that, and it's also a massive problem. So, I didn't want it to just be about Blaine. This isn't just about Blaine. This is about prioritizing our dollars on things that make sense. $29 million for Highway 10 in St. Cloud. $20 million for Trunk Highway 5 in Chanhassen. $74 million for Highway 65, which will rebuild 105th and 109th, and we already got the money last night for 99th. $30 million for Highway 10, extra lane from Hanson Boulevard. $20 million for 36, and $25 million for Highway 14 near Rochester. These are important to each person who lives there. Whereas $200 million for a train to Duluth that will hang around the taxpayers' necks and never go away once we get it started. We're already billions over on Southwest Light Rail. North Star is already a total nightmare. This is how the taxpayer is expected to use our gigantic surplus. And actually, we're not even using the giant surplus because it raises taxes by $3.5 billion in this bill. We need to do this for these communities in these districts. So I think I made my case. Please, for the sake of Highway 65 and those other highways, I ask for a yes vote and request a roll call.
Representative West requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Representative Damath.
Madam Speaker, I request a call of the House.
Representative Damath requests a call of the House. Seeing 10 hands, there will be a call of the House. The clerk will take the roll on the call. Members, we're under call. Please press your button if you are in the chamber, and only your button. Members, we're under call. The clerk will close the roll. Is there any further discussion to the amendment? Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd request a no vote. As I mentioned yesterday, this bill, we support all modes of transit, passenger rail, roads, bridges, all across the state. We've already done an excellent amendment that was added yesterday to fund Highway 65. I went to a great town meeting in Representative Norris's district where I saw the passion. We have spent a lot of important time in our committee over many years supporting Highway 65. I'm glad we support it in the bill, and NLX is an excellent investment. So again, for those reasons, please vote no.
Any further discussion to the amendment? The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Members, please vote. We're under call. The clerk will close the roll. There being 64 ayes and 66 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Madam Speaker,
Representative Long.
I move that the call of the House be lifted.
Representative Long moves that the call of the House be lifted. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. Motion prevails. The call of the House is lifted.
Kosnick moves to amend House Law number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A75.
The member from Dakota, Representative Kosnick.
Madam Speaker, members of the House of Representatives, the state of the state is overtaxed and growing. Dems are raising taxes by $10 billion, and Minnesotans are getting run over with $3.45 billion in transportation taxes in this bill alone. Before us, we have the A74 amendment. It deals with
the A75 amendment. Representative Kosnick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We can work with that. The A75 amendment is on the same issue. Within this transportation tax, there is a metro-only sales tax. And those of you that have been around here for a while, those of you that were here in 2008, remember CTIB, the County's Transit Improvement Board, and it had a similar mechanism, sales tax, and it didn't work out so well for the collar counties of Dakota, Anoka, Scott, and Washington, and Carver. And after a long, drawn-out fight, kind of like a bad relationship or a marriage that wasn't working, it was messy, it was horrible, and it was an expensive divorce. This sales tax reappears again in a slightly different form. A couple years ago, when we had the transportation bill that the Democrats proposed, they tried to bring back the metro sales tax. I called that CTIB 2.0. And it was kind of like when you tried to rekindle a relationship that didn't really work out, but only one of the partners was really interested. But they tried pretty hard, but we were lucky we were able to stop CTIB 2.0 and have a bad relationship again. Now before us, we have today CTIB 3.0. This time it's kind of like a forced arrangement because of the trifecta. But it's a marriage and a relationship that's doomed for failure and misery. The A75 Metro sales tax requires that 60% of the revenue collected, raised in the new county, it be returned to each county that originates their revenues, and also requires that instead of the tab board to distribute it, the counties would have more control over it. And so if you go back to my forced arrangement analogy, we might not be able to stop a new sales tax forced upon the collar counties, but we're kind of pre-negotiating a prenuptial agreement here to at least get a better deal than we did when the original sales tax was imposed upon the collar counties, because the two core counties of Hennepin and Ramsey County, I know that's many of my colleagues across the aisle, they did quite well spending Anoka's money, Carver's money, Scott County's money, Washington County's money, and of course Dakota County's money. In that first arrangement, I think it was like every dollar that Dakota County raised, we received like 7 cents back. We got taken to the cleaners. But after a long, drawn-out fight, Representative Hornstein, you've watched these fights, we were able and successful to work out a dissolution agreement. And that's actually the term that we used and the document that was used to dissolve CTIB originally, dissolution. And so, members, I request your support in this amendment to at least let the counties have a little bit more say in the revenues that are originated in its own county when this sales tax is being forced upon us. So I ask for your support on the A75.
Discussion. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Representative Koznick, there are parts to this amendment that I think hold promise. There's other parts I have concerns of. I just wanted to say to you and to the body and to the public on the record that this is an issue that does need to be addressed in terms of the allocation to the counties of the sales tax. And we are working with the counties. There are a number of different proposals. I'll be meeting with them, tentatively a week from Friday, and we do intend to just come to an agreement and work this out. So again, I appreciate your bringing this up, but at this time I would like to request a no vote because I think there's a little bit more work that needs to be done. But again, you're identifying an issue and we're working on it.
Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would request a roll call on this A75
Representative
amendment.
Koznick requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Koznick.
Thank you. And, at a time, overall, this deals with a $2 billion or something tax increase where we look at the overall budget scheme that's being presented. That's our job, to put together a 2-year budget. Democrats are raising taxes about $10 billion, and $3.5 billion of those taxes are here in the transportation bill. Minnesotans are getting run over by tax increases. And at a time where we have $7.5 billion in surplus, a little bit more if you count for inflation, plus reserves, Minnesotans don't understand why we are spending and trying to raise and being asked to pay more, $10 billion in tax increases. They're tired of getting run over. The constituents that I serve, and those that serve Anoka, Carver, Scott, and Washington, as well as Dakota, we're tired of being used as a piggy bank to fund the core counties. A better approach, if that's what you want to do, should be that you raise your own money, pay for your own stuff through a sales tax, we'll come and visit. You can profit off us then. But we're tired of being taxed in our own counties and shipping it into the core counties. That's just not an equitable way, not a just way to do it. Residents in Anoka, Carver, Dakota, Scott, and Washington, we have to balance our budgets. We have our own family issues, business issues that are struggling sometimes. And they would like a little bit more control and to stop being run over by the core counties. Members, I ask for your support on this amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kosnick moves to amend House File Number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A74.
The member from Dakota, Representative Kosnick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I go on too far, can I request a roll call?
Representative Kosnick requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Kosnick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This deals with the same issue, a metro-only sales tax, and to the members across the state, think about if you campaigned and said, I'm going to go raise your taxes and increase the sales tax, and you can pay more for just about everything that you buy. You probably get a little pushback on that. In fact, constituents we're hoping that we'd be able to give them back some money with the historic surplus that we have, instead of, in this particular provision, raise taxes by $2 billion, and in the bill, a $3.5 billion tax increase in this transportation bill, on top of the delivery fees and a few of the other, making your cars more expensive to purchase and to renew your tabs. You know, these kind of taxes are taxes that hit the lower and middle income Minnesotans the hardest. But it goes to the out of control spending and priorities of the DFL majority. And so what this amendment does, members, it asks your constituents, if you're in the metro of Anoka, Carver, Dakota, Scott, Washington, and even Hennepin and Ramsey County. You might have some constituents that don't want you to raise your taxes. I bet you do. And so what the A74 amendment does is ask that it gets put on a referendum, and if your county, if you live in one of those counties, if you live in one of those counties, your constituents say, sure, we want to give more money to the collar counties, but we'll get to keep some of our own. We'll raise our own taxes. But at least the constituents and Minnesotans have some transparency, and you can go to the doors and ask them to vote to increase their own taxes if that's what you support. So, Madam Speaker, I would request that my colleagues join us in giving taxpayers of Minnesota a voice and vote green for the A74 amendment.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to request a no vote. This is, I think, similar to amendment that Representative West brought a couple years ago. And I told him, and I'll tell you now, Representative Kosnick, this is like what they do in California. This is a California solution, like what they do in Berkeley or Santa Monica. You know, they just they vote on everything. Like there's Proposition 10, Proposition 13, Proposition this, Proposition that. You know, we don't have to have a referendum on every single issue here. I think we can do this as a legislature, and I would ask the body to vote no on this California solution.
Representative Kosnick.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein. I'm having flashbacks. I'm having flashbacks to when we talked about this a couple years ago, trying to do CTIP 2.0. And there was a song, and I'm not very good at remembering the lyrics, but it was about some cloudy day in California or something to do with that. And not everything is all sunshine in California, but I think the voters of Minnesota, the voters of the Collier County, because this hasn't worked. That's the difference. We've tried this before. It failed miserably. It was expensive. It was painful. It was hurtful. People got in arguments. Lawyers made a lot of money. It helped fund Southwest Light Rail, and now we're changing that agreement, as we discussed earlier. And so I think that's why we need to ask the voters, do you want to continue funding some of this? I will tell you, the voters in Dakota County, I'll buy you dinner. If this passes in Dakota County, I'll buy you dinner. I'll buy you an Uber every time you need to get home from work. That's what I'll do. But they should have a say on this instead of a Minneapolis and DFL-controlled legislature imposing on Anoka, Carver, Dakota, Scott, and Washington to be taxed a little bit more. So, more broadly, and this will be in place of maybe a third reading speech, more broadly, I think we have to have this discussion about the Collier counties. You're asking us to pay more and more and more, but in reality, we're about 25%, 24% of the state's population if you take out Hennepin and Ramsey County. The Collier counties are about a quarter of that. We generate about 25% of the transportation revenues, so that's about fair. But under the trunk highways, the Collier counties receive, you would think, if we're 24% of the population, if we're about 25% of the revenues raised, you would think out of the trunk highway we would receive what? About 25% of the funding? No, that's not the way it works under the current formulas. In fact, greater Minnesota counties, they receive about almost 60%, 59% of the trunk highway funding. The two core counties receive about 28%. Hennepin and Ramsey County receive 28% of the trunk highway funding. But the Collier counties, that are about 24% of the population, we get 13%, but we generate 25% of the revenue. So I know we have a lot of discussion on our side of the aisle. Everything goes to the metro. Well, that's not exactly true. The Collier counties are significantly underrepresented in the funding formulas. If you look at the corridors of commerce, and Chair Hornstein, I have misgivings that I'm not in the Transportation Committee. I've enjoyed the 8 years that I served there, and we had some good discussion, some good agreements, and some good progress. But I want to caution you and use this time now. In the corridors of commerce funding, the Collier counties have received about $3.4 million only, 0.3%, since 2013 to 2018. There was a total of $1.1 billion awarded through corridors of commerce, $1.1 billion that was awarded. And Anoka and Dakota counties received about $3.4 billion of that. The greater Minnesota received about 57% of that corridors of commerce funding. And the two core counties, Hennepin and Ramsey County, received 42.3% of those corridors of commerce funding. And so I know a colleague on my side has a bill to kind of try to tweak those formulas. I think it needs to be taken a closer look at and scrutinized, because you're shortchanging 25% of the state's population, 24%, and growing. And with that growth, I can speak for the city that I live in, Lakeville, and the other cities I represent, one of the newest cities in the state, Credit River, a small city, Elko Newmarket, and the couple townships around there. It's a high-growth area, and they're trying to figure out how they accommodate that growth with a basic need of government, purpose of government is to provide a transportation system, the roads and bridges. But when we get 0.3% of the corridors of commerce funding and are shortchanged in trunk highway funding and CASA funding as a per capita, our taxpayers are figuring it out, and they don't need a metro-wide sales tax that goes into the core counties. We need the ability to raise the funds ourselves, and we'll do that when it's appropriate. And under fiscal constraint of our county board, we haven't gotten there yet. Scott County has, and it's a little bit controversial over there with some of the constituents that I talk about. And so I urge you, Chair Hornstein and the rest of the committee, to be very cautious on how you do the corridors of commerce when you recognize that only 0.3% of that funding in the last couple years went to 2 of those counties. Because you're really affecting people's lives. I know our job here, we think, is to represent our own district. Your title is state representative, and we have an obligation, and as chair, you've taught me, I've learned from you, especially in transportation, you look at the whole state and how we can try to address the needs of each state. And so when we have bills that are very provincial and say, oh, this area needs a lot more money, and this area, and try to strike a deal, please don't do it at the expense of collar counties. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members, I urge your support to let each of these counties decide if they themselves want to tax themselves instead of Minneapolis and St. Paul legislators shoving it down our throat, because Minnesotans are getting run over with tax increases, and I think you might have a different solution if you did this. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend House Bill number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A94.
The member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Appreciate the opportunity to offer the A94 amendment, which brings a little bit more fiscal responsibility to our state and helps out in ensuring that that the dollars that we do spend in transportation and infrastructure benefits people all across the state rather than a very select few group of people, and make sure that we're not investing in something that will not be used by our Minnesota public. So with that, that's what the A94 amendment does, is it provides to remove the funding for the Northern Lights Express train to Duluth, as well as other passenger rail projects throughout Minnesota. And instead, we're going to be funding county state aid highways, municipal state aid streets, town roads, and small cities to the tune of, members, $195 million, a massive benefit to the constituents across this state, a benefit to so many. And so with that, I wanted to ask, would Representative Listlegard yield?
He will yield. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Listlegard, could you share with the body what the benefit to the Northern Lights Express would be to the constituents who live in Aurora?
Representative Listlegard.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and to the representative. I tell you, as Rangers, we don't care if we haul the money up there in a truck or on a train. Either way, that money's coming up this way.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Listlegard, I am so sad to see that there's no amendment to build a train straight to Aurora, because many of your constituents won't have the chance to hop aboard this train and travel, by the way, at the same price that it costs to ride a bus right now. We can do that. There's actually 2 private businesses that do that right now, and you can travel from Duluth to Minneapolis. You can travel right to the airport, all for the exact same price as a ticket aboard the Northern Lights Express. Would Representative Brand yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Brand, can you tell me what the benefit to the constituents near St. Peter, the benefit they would see with the Northern Lights Express as compared to massive investments in county state aid highways, municipal aid state aid streets, the town roads, as well as the small cities within your district?
Representative Brand.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Schultz, what I would say to your question is this. That would be one less project that gets in the way to the train that would go to Mankato, which is something that I'm advocating for as well.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I think that this is just an excellent point to raise because we have a finite amount of dollars. No matter how much money Joe Biden wants to send to Minnesota for commuter rail and passenger rail, this is absolutely bonkers that we would be spending, whether from the federal government or the state government, $544 million on a train that people won't ride, for a train that is not going to effectively bring people where they need to be. Because again, 9 out of 12 months of the year, and in fact, members, I have to just share this story. It was not long ago. In fact, I think it was nearing the 4th of July, 2019, and I was in the city of Duluth, in downtown Duluth, and it was snowing. It was snowing. So I don't even know if I should say 9 out of 12 months in a year. But members, why would we spend this much money to send people to Duluth when they get there, they have no way of traversing that city at a cost that is anywhere near reasonable? Buses, the landline bus service, Groom Transportation, man, they take you to all sorts of different places throughout the city for the exact same price of the ticket aboard the Northern Lights Express. So when we could be spending money and sending money to our counties, to our townships, to our small cities across this state, instead, members, we are spending $195 million on a train that is not needed. Oh, and by the way, this is on the BNSF track, so I imagine that if Warren Buffett wanted, he could have this train for himself if he wanted. Why are we subsidizing that kind of train when he could do it if it was effective? Why is government trying to get in the way of the private marketplace? There's an opportunity to do that. But members, this is about bringing money for small communities across this state, for counties, all 87 counties, for our townships, and for our cities. The largest city in my district has 2,900 people. Every other one of my cities is small, smaller than that. And I'll just say that I have a hard time believing that there will be any one of my constituents that see the benefits of $544 million worth of their tax dollars through the Northern Lights Express to Duluth. Madam Speaker, I ask for a roll call on this
Representative
amendment.
Schultz requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a matter of priorities, members. We do not need to be spending money on a project that frankly is likely to exceed the $544 million price tag. For people to hop on a train in Minneapolis and ride to Duluth on a trip that would take nearly double the time of if you chose to take a bus or a van in private industry. A terrible use of taxpayer dollars. We have the way to transport people. Let's vote for this amendment and stop the Northern Lights Express.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Asking for a no vote. This is similar to other amendments that we've had on NLX. We can have a multimodal system and fund the roads and bridges that Representative Schultz is concerned about. We do that in this bill. Please vote no.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take, the member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, members, Representative Schultz, thank you for this amendment. This train goes through my district. The Northern Lights Express that they want to do is going to take freight rail off the line. A lot of lumber and a lot of other things go through my district on the Burlington Northern Rails. The biggest problem we have is Highway 95 in Cambridge, where the switch is. Where the station for the Northern Lights Express is going to be, that shuts down Highway 95. A few years ago, I was given a call of a car accident 8 miles east of Cambridge. I was 7 miles west of Cambridge when the call came in. A serious crash. I was 4 miles from the railroad tracks when I had to turn around, go 2 miles farther west to do a 10-mile detour because the railroad tracks in Cambridge were blocked from the trains and I couldn't get through. We don't need this rail blocking more Highway 95 traffic. The Northern Lights Express will be 6 runs. 3 in the morning, or actually, if I remember correctly, it's going to be 12. 3 in the morning, in the daytime, in the morning, 3 in the afternoon each way. That's 6 loads of freight that will not be able to get through. We also have a supply chain shortage right now. Those things come on through the rail, our freight rail, and we're going to take it away. For those of you who do not know, the line going from Minneapolis to Duluth is not a double line, it's a single line. And a lot of the sidings block roads. The other thing I noticed in my county, where they're planning to put the Northern Lights Express, is they're going to be shutting down railroad crossings. Now, in emergency situations, Representative Backers knows this well, you have precious minutes to get to emergency calls, emergency medicals. And you shut down those crossings, that adds time to get to those medicals. What we need to do is shut down the Northern Lights Express. Support the Schultz amendment.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment.
That's more than we have in Minnesota.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Olson B moves to amend House File Number 2887, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A39.
The member from Martin County, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And really quickly, I'd ask for a roll call on this amendment.
Representative Olson requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate the fact that I get to tie up these amendments with a nice little bow here. The A39 amendment would remove the registration tax increase that we have. Now, members, this bill is increasing taxes on Minnesota taxpayers by $3.5 billion. And I think that's a terrible thing. But what I think is the most terrible is the concept of hidden fees and deceitful taxes. Now, when you go in and buy a new vehicle, and this registration tax increase is exactly designed to target new vehicle purchases. It actually raises the rates on your new vehicle's registration by 51%, members. Now, just to give you a quick little understanding, the governor came in and he gave his proposal, which had a 25% increase over the life expectancy of your vehicle. And this bill does one even larger. This bill, over the life expectancy of your vehicle, will increase taxes on your vehicle and on yourself by 30%. This is more than what the governor himself asked. And when the governor asked for it, I thought that was absolutely outrageous. But here's the deal, members. 51% increase on your new vehicle. Here's the problem. When you go in and buy a new vehicle, as many people do, you walk in and they say this vehicle is going to be $39.95. And then there's an asterisk that says plus tax, title, and licensing fees. On all the commercials, it rapidly goes through this. This price does not include tax, title, and licensing fees, right? Every single one. You walk in there and you have no actual idea how much this is going to cost you. You just know that it's at least going to cost you this much. Well, members, we are increasing that exponentially with this tax increase. You are going to walk into your vehicle automotive dealership and you're going to say, hey, I need a new vehicle. And they're going to say, great, here you go. You're going to buy it. And then they're going to tell you how much you owe on it after you've decided how to pay for it. Now, members, this is why it's so bad. Even with the gas tax, there's a sticker on every single gas pump in the state of Minnesota, and it says this on that sticker: the price of each gallon of gasoline includes the current state gasoline tax of 28.5 cents per gallon and federal gasoline tax of 18.4 cents per gallon. Revenue from the state fuel tax may only be used for roads and bridges according to the Minnesota Constitution. When you buy a gallon of gas, they tell you exactly how much money you are paying in taxes. When you go and buy a vehicle, you have no idea how much you are going to pay in taxes. And the worst part about it is that tax increase is equal to more than 900 gallons worth of the gas tax. This increase is worth 900 gallons worth of the gas tax. That's how high we are raising this registration fee. Now, members, the worst part about this is you talk about, the majority of vehicles that are owned by individuals are 5 years or older. Well, here's the deal. 85% of new vehicles are financed. 85. That means that it's hurting everyday Americans. They're going to go and they're going to buy their vehicle, they're going to get a loan on it, they're going to pay 6, 7, or 8% interest on that loan, and then they're going to pay interest on their taxes, members. What a great day to be a bank. The state of Minnesota is making these loans money because they're going to be paying interest on their taxes, members. This is a tragedy. This is an absolute tragedy. And I want to correct the record because a couple individuals made comments. They said, we've got to raise revenue because the gas tax just isn't bringing in as much as it used to. The Minnesota Department of Transportation has provided projections that state the gas tax will reduce revenues by 1% per year into the future. 1%, members. The gas tax projections are less than 1%, between 1 and 2 maybe. And we're raising rates by 51% on the first year of your vehicle registration. The math doesn't add up. It's a very poor argument. Now, Chair Hornstein and I have had this argument a couple times. We've played this song and dance. We did it in the Transportation Committee. We did it again in the Tax Committee, and now we're doing it on the House floor here. And I always start by saying, members, this is a shameful tax. It's hidden fees, and it's not transparent to the Minnesota automotive buyer. And then he responds back with, what's shameful is that the potholes that you're crashing into are ruining your vehicle. And then my response now is what's truly shameful, members, is that we are increasing taxes on Minnesotans by the tune of $3.5 billion when we have $17.5 billion in a surplus. That is what is shameful, members. Vote for this amendment. Vote to remove this tax increase, this shameful tax increase.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a couple of quick items about this. First of all, no one will pay more on a previously registered vehicle. That is current law, and we're not changing that. Secondly, if your car is 10 years old or older, you'll actually be paying less tab fees than you currently pay. So, members, this is a very, very important part of the bill. We raise $237 million a year for roads, bridges. We need to ensure our safe roads and roads across the state, townships, counties, cities. Please vote no on this amendment.
Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to close this up, yes, according to the chair's formula that he has designed, you will, in fact, save some money on an 11-year-old vehicle. But here's the thing. On your first year of a $40,000 vehicle purchase, you will pay over $230 in taxes increased on your registration fee. $230 more for the first year. The last year, that 11th year, you will save yourself $5 whole, members. $5 whole. Vote yes to remove this shameful tax.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2887, as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. The member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And first of all, Representative Hornstein, I want to sincerely say to you that you are one of the best legislators in this chamber. You're a good friend. Every member on this side of the aisle should have a chance to go have a beer with Representative Hornstein. One of my top 20 experiences in my life as a legislator was when you and I shared a beer on a patio in Berlin, Germany. I want to let you know that you're a good guy, and I want to especially thank you as these wave of DFL tax increases are coming, these barbarians at the gate. You, Frank Hornstein, stood strong at the gates and said no to the DFL on raising the tax on electric vehicles. You said 75 was enough. There was one tax increase that you just couldn't stomach. You stood up and said no. And you know, Representative Hornstein, I thought about what a great guy you are, and I thought about the fact that you stood up to electric vehicles, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to vote for this bill. And then I put down the joint I was smoking and said, maybe now is not the best time to make a decision on how I'm going to vote. So I sobered up, I woke up the next morning, and I read your bill, Representative Hornstein. And as everyone knows, we've got a $17.5 billion budget surplus in this state. We already have some of the highest license tab fees in the nation, Madam Speaker and Representative Hornstein. Some of the highest license tab fees in the nation, and you're increasing them in this bill. Minnesota already has one of the highest motor vehicle sales tax rates in the nation. And Representative Hornstein, you're raising those. And then when it comes to sales taxes, after the Hornstein and Howard sales tax increases go into effect, Anoka, Dakota, Washington, they're going to have a sales tax rate of 8.125%, Representative Hornstein, and over 8% sales tax. In Scott and Carver counties, it's going to be even higher, 8.375% sales tax rates in those counties, Madam Speaker, and Representative Hornstein. So, Representative Hornstein, thank goodness I sobered up. I'm voting no on your bill. Members, we cannot be raising taxes and punishing taxpayers in the state of Minnesota with a $17.5 billion surplus. Madam Speaker, Representative Hornstein, give the taxpayers a break. Lower their cost. Don't raise their taxes. Say no, just like you did on that horrible EV fee. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Hornstein.
Member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker and members. One of the biggest challenge, we've heard from our representative over here, we have a $17.5 billion surplus. We're raising taxes by $3.5 billion, and we're really socking it to the people in rural greater Minnesota. A lot of folks in my district, they order online. In Browns Valley, if you can't get it at the local hardware store, you order online. Though on the serious note, we take a lot of people order online in Greater Minnesota. Thank you. And this delivery tax, when we have this surplus of $17.5 billion, and then we're raising this on not just, everybody orders online in Greater Minnesota. And this tax just really hurts individuals who are just getting by. I mean, if they order online from Amazon to save a little bit, they're not going to save. They're going to have to spend more. And we have yet to talk about the businesses in Greater Minnesota that ships their products. Because when you live in a smaller community, you don't have that retail or that customer base to bring in your revenue for your community, for the business. So you work across the state. You ship things up to the Iron Range. You ship things through Thief River Falls, down to the metro area. So when we have such a huge surplus of $17.5 billion, this delivery tax is wrong for the whole state, but especially for Greater Minnesota. Vote no. Thank you, members.
The member from Brown, Representative Torkelson.
Very quickly, Madam Chair, I just wanted to thank Representative Hornstein for the inclusion of the corridors of commerce language.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hudella. The member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the 0.75% sales tax increase in this bill, Minneapolis will officially have a higher sales tax than San Francisco. So you're right, this bill isn't from San Francisco. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Members, ain't no income high enough, ain't no income low enough to keep the DFL taxes from being raised on you. Members, vote no.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hudella.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We heard a lot of great reasons. I recommend a no vote. Thank you.
The member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And first of all, I would like to also thank Chair Hornstein for working with me and allowing me to have input into this bill. And of course, we have Joe Marble from our side, who does a great job, and Enid from Swigert from his side that kept us all going. Chair Hornstein, I have the same passion for transportation that you do, and I have agree on a lot of the need for what we have to do in transportation. However, that's where our agreement, I think, disappears in the fact that I need to disagree on how we meet that need. You have raised virtually every revenue raiser that could be raised to the fact that we are about a 30% growth in the transportation budget area. And we need to look at some of those raisers. First, the 0.75% sales tax. Over $1 billion per biennium is coming into new dollars. In essence, by the way, this is an earmark because it's earmarking for a particular purpose for a particular one. So I'm just not sure that we need to do that. Where is the money going to go? So I've talked to Met Council when they were in our committee and asked them why they requested a 0.75% sales tax increase and what were they going to use it for. They told us that they only thought they were getting 1/8%, as what the governor agreed to, and they really want to, they didn't really know what they're going to use it for. They couldn't even tell us how many FTEs was going to happen with that. I'm going to be a little bit briefer, so I'm getting the nod that I should be a little bit quicker. The most controversial, the 75 cents delivery tax, is disappointed that we couldn't get exempted our low income, our seniors, those that it's going to be the most regressive on. I think that was a mistake. I think that was an issue that we need to deal with. License tab fees, 30% increase. Now, all of that's going to occur in the first 5 years of the car's life. Apparently, only the rich buy new cars. That's not true. Transit transit should be receiving, we should be reviewing policies and programs, especially when we are dealing with this amount of dollars. We're blindly following the processes and the business models from the past that aren't necessarily working. We have an opportunity to review through post-COVID and others the things that are moving forward so that we could actually make educated decisions in how we move forward, and again, something that's not going to happen. Right now, there's anywhere from about 2 to a 10% fare box recovery on most of our transit. I want people to remember what that means is that 9 people have to pay the same amount as the person riding the train in order to pay the expenses for that person riding a train. I would love to have my electricity bill, 90% of it paid by somebody else. I'd love that. Or my house mortgage, but that's not the case. The one thing that we didn't talk about is in regards to the issue of having race and ethnicity put on the driver's license. And I, for one, am trying to figure out how that has any impact on somebody's ability to drive a car. What I know it does do is that with the motor voter registration program that we have, once you become registered through that motor vehicle registration, all that data becomes public. That should be a concern for all of us. So I don't want to be just always no, saying no. So somebody's going to ask me, well, what are the options? Well, there are 3 areas of responsibility in this Constitution for us. We are to be responsible for public safety, K-12 education, and infrastructure. That's where transportation comes. This is our infrastructure. You know, we've heard a lot of people talk about disinvestment. We have disinvested in this. No, we have prioritized other things because we have to be fiduciary responsible. That's where I think this comes in. We need to understand the importance of the infrastructure, the importance of how it needs to be funded by all of us. Every person in this state, in this building, is dependent upon transportation, and I think that's something that we need to deal with in regards to that. There are some good things in this bill, things that we've been pushing for quite a while. We are moving forwards towards auto parts coming in. That's a great thing. The Department of Public Safety and Highway Department is getting a much-needed helicopter for rescue. That's a good thing. We're getting some IIJ funding. That's a good thing. Representative Torkelson talked about Corridors of Commerce and the revamping of that project selection. That's a good thing. And of course, we even got some expansion of microtransit into Rochester, which is a good thing. So there's some things in there that's very good. However, it doesn't outweigh all the other increases, the 30% growth in funding in a direction in which I think we had other alternatives. So I'm asking for a no on this bill.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Please vote yes for this historic generational investment in transportation where all modes of transportation are supported and all parts of the state benefit. Please vote yes.
Member from Stearns, Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, as we have discovered in this bill, there's $3.5 billion in tax increases. Included in that is $200 million for a train to Duluth. So we're raising billions of dollars in regressive taxes to fund another train that I have concerns about what that fare box recovery would actually be. We don't need to spend this in the bill, especially not $200 million when there are actually buses that would take us from the Twin Cities to Duluth. So members, this bill is expensive, it is wasteful, it raises taxes in the amount of $3.5 billion, and yet we have that $17.5 billion surplus. We have not funded nursing homes. We have not given tax relief to Minnesotans. This is not the direction we want to go, nor should we go. Please vote no.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In our debate today and yesterday, we've heard concerns about transportation needs in all of our communities, whether those are potholes, congestion, safety concerns, repairs. We know that we have infrastructure needs in every single one of our communities across the state. The easy thing to do is to pretend like we don't have a problem with funding those needs. The easy thing to do is to pretend like our existing revenues are sufficient. to pretend like one-time money can fix problems that aren't one-time problems. We have done the easy thing for decades. The last time lawmakers passed new long-term funding was when a bridge fell down in our community and people died. It has been since then that we have not stepped up to do the right thing, and today we're going to do the right thing. We are stepping up to address our needs for safety, for equity, for climate, for jobs. Members, do the right thing and vote green.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 71 ayes and 59 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.